microphones on the tables are capable of picking up the rustle of papers and side conversations. I invite Mr. Parker, to commence the roll call.
Wayne Parker.
Gary Garrett.
Gary Winterton.
Kay Van Buren. Dave Sewell.
Stephen Hales.
Hal Miller.
Matt Pearman.
Brian Jones.
Louise Jorgensen.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Santiago will join us before long. Some months ago, I invited Wayne Parker to arrange for a member of the city staff to provide the opening prayer at these meetings. He has been kind enough to do so. That is the prayer, and then to say something more about that individual's role in the city government. Today we hear from the man himself. It is our pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me apologize. We have a randomly generated list that we've been using, and I worked my way through the randomly generated list, and I invited 3 different city employees last week, and all of them had conflicts, and I never got to the 4th. So I by the luck of the draw, I guess. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to be gathered today in this municipal council work meeting. We're grateful for the cause of good government that brings us together. We appreciate the opportunity to serve and to participate in the dialogue which leads to effective decision making. We invoke thy blessing upon the members of the council today and those who will present. Please bless us with insight and wisdom. Help us to ask good questions and to make decisions which will best serve the residents and the community in which we live. We again express our gratitude to be gathered today and do this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. You know my role all too well, I think, so probably more than you ever wanted to know. But I appreciate the opportunity. It's been an exciting 10, almost 11 years that I've been here with the city, and we've seen a lot of very good things happen as the result of excellent work and partnership by the city staff, elected officials, and our many partners in the community. So it's just been a privilege to be associated with the city for this time. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. I call for a motion to approve the minutes of the work meetings held respectively on April 15th and April 29th, 2014.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Garrett, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Winterton, the second. All in favor, please indicate. The vote is unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you. We next take up a discussion of the timeline for the submittal of project documents to the Federal Transit Authority, the FTA, for the Provo Ore Bus Rapid Transit BRT project. We welcome Janelle Erickson and Greg Turner from Utah Transit Authority, and turn to them.
So after our discussion with the leadership last week, I thought it would be helpful to kind of give you an idea of where we are and where we're heading on the BRT project. We've been moving forward since March when we were giving direction, and just kind of giving you an idea of all the things that are to come in order to secure the local and federal funding for the project. So I kind of just wrote up a little memo that outlines that. I'm going to still this one for a second. So there are several things that we have to complete over the next few months in order to make all the timelines for the grant application, tying up the environmental documents, and completing design, and then moving on to securing the funding. So we kind of walk you through this memo that I completed here. First, starting with the environmental assessment, that's what we've been working on fast and furiously since March when we were given approval to move forward with the option 4 as our alignment. In our discussion with FTA in March, they determined that they wanted us to produce another EA, but this EA would be a shorter, version of the old one where we summarized what was in the original environmental document and then documented any changes or impacts and did all the analysis for the new area that wasn't included in the first alignment. So we've been working on that. We'll go through some rounds of reviews with FTA and us and Lochner on the documentation. And then we will publish it for public comment the 1st of August. And this is the schedule right now, but it will be really dependent on FTA being able to also meet those deadlines, or if they find anything significant that they don't agree with, that could change the schedule. So this is just a kind of proposed look ahead of where we think we can go with this. So the month of August the document will be available for public comment either on the website or they can write us, or all the options will be listed with the document. After the public comment period ends, we will take the month of September to review all the comments, respond to the comments, and then we'll produce a finding of no significant impact. It's the final document that's basically the cover document to the environmental assessment. There's a lot of documentation here. But in that document, we'll state that there is no significant impact, that the project can move forward, basically, that they don't feel it's extreme issues with the project. In that document, we can go through and anything that's come out of the public comment period that is worth noting or changing, we can include that in the policy as well to have that documentation in the environmental assessment, as well as all public comments will be published with the environmental document in the final document. So October, FONSI means we're done with the environmental document. We're given approval to move forward, and we're done with that part. It's a reference document for the rest of the project, but it's completed at that point. Preliminary design, we've been working on that since October of last year. The county has given UTA $2.8 million to complete the preliminary design, which included finishing the environmental assessment and the public involvement process that we've been going through. So that is scheduled to be completed in October. A lot of what's coming out of the design work that we're working on now with UDOT and the cities is, any minor changes to the design that need to be documented in the environmental document, and then producing a 30% design plan set during that time, so that we feel, we're pretty clear there's no major flaws in the design, that we're moving in a good direction. The Small Starts Grant application requires a bunch of different things. We've submitted the application once. They have new guidance now, so we will resubmit that. We'll update them and resubmit those in August for federal review. FTA is going to hire project management oversight, which is an outside consultant this summer, who will do a review of the project documentation, and then we'll also do a readiness review, which says whether or not they believe the project is ready to be funded. July through October, we will also be producing our project management plan, and that PMO oversight also reviews and finalizes that plan that we produce for approval as well. June through September, we're going to finalize the financial plan. We have we voted on the way the project's local funding was going to be with the RPC going to be funded. All we have to do is finalize that in a final legal agreement and then provide that documentation to FTA for our review of our readiness as well. They want to know that the local matches for certain. Fall of 2014 is when FTA will make a recommendation whether they believe the project is ready and should be funded. They'll make a recommendation for how much we should get and when we should get it. We are aiming that will be for year 2016 funds in the President's budget, which means it'll become available summer of 2015 for us to use. And then in February 2015 is when the full year 2016 budget is finalized. You can see the project in there. Then on to final design. After we complete the preliminary set of design drawings, we can go ahead and procure a final designer. And also then after that, we'll start doing some more design work in between now and then we will hire a construction contractor. The method of procurement is CMGC, which means that the design and construction will overlap. We won't finish design and then hire a contractor. We want to overlap those to get more input from the contractor process. And then we expect construction and final design from April 2015 to December 2016. That's kind of where we're heading if we can get all of our ducks in a row.
Okay.
Yes, Matt.
Construction, is that commencement construction or finalization?
From April 2015, yeah.
Ideally, it would start about this time next year, and about 2 construction seasons.
That makes sense.
I assume that this is your agenda for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't have anything to do, so, you know, if you can think of anything for me.
This is wonderfully helpful and informative. Thank you. I invite members of the council, should there be questions, Ms. Erickson or Mr. Turner. Oops, sorry.
So you mentioned the new area that wasn't in the original environmental. What area is that that's included?
That is the area on 900 North near BYU campus where we moved the station to.
For the Rooster Building?
Yes. Yeah, that area was not included in the original environmental. The route did not go on that road previously.
What contact number is the best number to check with you for updates along the way? If we just wanted to.
Yeah,
So, Janelle, is your number the best? Are you the one that would be?
yeah.
So which number is that?
My number is 801-512-3023.
Thank you.
And I know that you are continuing to meet with groups
Yes,
still.
yes.
When do those processes need to be completed by?
So I think we never really, public involvement kind of goes all the way through the end of construction when we're doing this stuff. In the design, right now,
Because the design continues along with construction.
yeah, it's continuing along with the construction, and then also just because construction has impacts and can have impacts that we didn't anticipate. So public involvement goes through the whole way. Design details that we want to include, we're starting now. We want to have reconvene the group area 1, which was the original stakeholders for that area, and go through the detailed designs as we have been with the downtown Provo area, where we're going through the detail of what the design looks like and what we need where and what needs to happen with that. So hopefully we can continue that through the end of Lochner's design contract, which should end in October. And then once we hire the next design contractor, it will have even more refinements. If there are any major things that we think are going to come out of that, we will need to get that out in the public comment period in August.
Have you, as you've been meeting with these group of people, have you noticed any major changes as far as design at this point?
We haven't talked about design with the group area 1 yet. That first meeting is scheduled for July 11th. The downtown Provo area, we really haven't had any major concerns other than, does parking make more sense here or here, and just, kind of moving stuff around a little, but we're staying within the footprint of the original project area.
So parking is,
Oh, sorry, June 11th. Sorry, June 11th is the first meeting for group 1.
With group 1, we've had other groups that have been working with already. Downtown group has been actively engaged.
Mhm.
So,
Yes, please.
There's been some question on the council about how we should request mitigations or adjustments. Is that something that we need to define in advance? You know, when the neighborhood says, as this comes through our area, here's some of the things we'd like to make sure happen in the neighborhood. Is that going to be part of the design, or is that going to be a separate process?
I think it will be part of the design. I'm hoping that we can get some education about, you know, what are the typical type of enhancements in these type of projects, what things are effective, what things are not effective, you know, how can we you know, help with the concerns, but really that's a design detail. We can't say whether or not we can put something somewhere without doing design work for it. So I'm hoping that we can refine that in the next few meetings with that group, and then get a list that's, you know, with reason behind it and with actual, you know, effectiveness. We know these are typical things as practice in transportation projects that we do to help with these concerns, you know, so that there's a little more education, a little more something behind it, especially if we're going to ask, you know, FTA to put it in a document, you know, that it's typical stuff that would be done for these types of concerns, and
Provo
that is
has,
effective.
you know, some things we were hoping to get that may not be typical of a project like this. For example, on 9th East, accommodating the bike path, having a pedestrian path, redoing some of the streetscape
So
things in order to make
the
that-
pedestrian path we knew was something that was a desire of the city already. So the path is already, we've started some design work on that. We can show that to the group the next time we go. It is in the document already. That path is already being accounted for, and FTA already knows about that path. So it's the other things that we need to work through.
So at some point, you're hoping to get a list from the city or from these groups that you're going to be.
Yeah, you know, I'm hoping maybe we can work with the groups on, you know, the stuff that's effective, and then we could bring to you and say, this is, you know, the design of the street and what this area is thinking they'd like to see. I don't know that it needs a council, you know, mandate of any sort, especially not just yet.
Yeah, what we've done in the past, I'm new with UTA, but have designed several projects. I just came off of the West Valley Airport light rail lines that I designed. And when we go through those processes, we import, you know, we bring on these groups to help us through the design process. You know, we look at different enhancements. We look at like the bike path that we want to put in, and we incorporate that into the design, as well as any other things that, you know, as we go through the design, we look at different impacts that there might be and how we can mitigate those or different enhancements. And a lot of times we find too that when we get into that, cities will say, well, while we're here, can we do, you know, some of these other things? For example, Salt Lake City, if you look at North Temple, they viewed that time as an opportunity to let's make North Temple a complete street. And, you know, they kicked in $70+ million to turn North Temple into what it is now, with all the colored concrete and the colored poles and the artwork and things like that. So there are, you know, different enhancements that can be done. We will look at them and we'll incorporate that, and that's when we look at combining the design versus what we've got available in the budget, and is there opportunities for sharing those enhancements, you know, with the city? Can we incorporate all of that into the budget? What can we, you know, we look at those things and we weigh those out, but that's why we have the design, the stakeholder groups with us to help, so they can see the process that we're going through. It's not just us dictating what happens, they can see what happens from the beginning. So.
And I know UTA has a great record of being able to finish projects under budget and actually turn budget back into the federal government. And both the second opinion study and your original study showed the cost of BRT project is less than $150 million. So we're hoping that there will be ample budget to do a lot of these things. I'm just wondering what's the best way so that the city feels like they're going to get the mitigations that they need before that budget is turned back in. Right. It can actually be part of the budget. You're not expecting the city. You don't have $70 million like Salt Lake.
Right.
Unless they have,
right.
You gotta go talk to those guys, see what they're doing.
Right. Well, and if we have, you know, if we have all this money left over, how do we best share that throughout the project? It's not all going to go to Provo or not all going to go to Orem. What are the best areas? How can we best, make this project the best it can be, and where do we need to obligate those
So
funds?
how will you answer that question? That's like, what process will you go through?
I think going through the stakeholder process and involving the different groups as we go through it. I can't say that, oh yeah, we're going to have money left over. It's hard to say that. We've had money left over in the past. I will also say that we've turned that money into the feds, or we've tried to keep it, and the feds are now starting to take that back. That if you don't spend it, they'll take it back. And so we are now looking at making sure we spend whatever we have obligated as much as we can to make the project the best it can be. And so I don't know if there's a way that we can officially say that, Provo, you'll get, if we have 50 million saved at the end of the project, then Provo will get half and Orem will get half. I don't know if we can say that for sure, but
there are some things that we've talked about in the bidding process that we could possibly do, and this is by getting it incorporated into design, is that we can have options when the contractor bids stuff that should we be under budget that we want to see. That way, we know that we can, they're a part of the project to begin with, but there are things that, when we get to that point, they're already being accounted for in the design, but there are options to the contractor whether or not we're going to choose to implement them into the project. And a lot of that will depend on whether we have money for it or not.
A lot of it has to do with the CMGC method that we're using, that it is a method that we found has, the light rail lines, we saved about $300 million by using that type of contracting method. So it's something that we don't really plan on, but like I say, we have a list of items that we, as money comes available, we can use that. So, we, I think through our interaction with the stakeholder groups and with the councils, I think we can come up with, we don't have it yet, but we can set up a way that we can look at if there are unused funds, how we can best spend those amongst the project.
And how we make them seem as though, FTA is like, we don't need that.
It's hard for us to
get, so it's kind of a fine balance.
It's hard for us to get a list of mandated or a list of mitigation items, and we haven't even gotten into the design part of it yet. And that's what we want to make as part of the design process. And we have done that, and have had a good track record in West Valley and in West in Salt Lake City and South Salt Lake with the streetcar project. And so, I can say that we've got a pretty good track record of working with stakeholder groups and incorporating all of that stuff.
If I might, Mr. Hales asked a wonderfully timely question. You said we can't guarantee this at this point in time. And my response to that is, nor should you, because none of us is omniscient. And even though the federal government may essentially posture as omniscient on occasion, I believe the federal government has a keen interest in seeing this project succeed to the fullest possible extent, which means making peace with the local municipalities and doing best by their design wishes. Accordingly, the administration offered at our municipal council leadership meeting last Thursday the draft of a joint agreement. We have not proposed a joint agreement to this point, and the administration's wish to do so, their overture, is premised on articulating as wisely as possible a policy by which to proceed in working with all of the project partners. Each member of the council has received a copy of that draft with an invitation to study it closely, to pay particular note, thanks to our council, to the ways in which it differs from the resolution we adopted previously on the 4th of March, and that we will make this a matter of our conversation at the next work meeting, followed by consideration formally at the council meeting 3rd of June. But I encourage the council to pay particularly close attention to the language in this proposed joint resolution that addresses Mr. Hale's question and related questions about how best to operate in a dynamic design environment. Mr. Winter.
With that being said, I know that you've organized stakeholder groups. What if someone feels like they haven't been heard? Is there any way to voice their opinion if they're not in that particular group that's already been organized?
Yeah, we have, and I have to make sure we're in the process. We had a project website that was its own standalone website. We're in the process of moving it over to UTA's website. So I need to, that's one way, or they can just call me as well. But one way would be to come in on the website or to call our customer service, call me, or we'll also have the document out for public comment. That will be, on record for the document.
For the document in August, or like say to get a hold of the neighborhood chairs.
And are all the neighborhood chairs invited to the stakeholders? We don't have all those that are, I guess we have most of them that are involved in this.
Yeah.
The route goes through
We have,
along the route.
we have the project divided up into different groups, and so neighborhood chairs, like for specific, are invited to those.
Thank you.
Sessions. So if somebody feels like they want to have a comment in that specific, they should talk to the chair.
Thank you.
Somebody else?
So you mentioned that the path will be included on 9th East, on the east side of the road, will be included in the project, and that was not included originally.
Right.
And so it seems as though some enhancements, like that one, that's very important to the project, or important to those living along the project, could occur before this design phase. So I guess I wonder what is the process, and who sort of makes that final call on these enhancements?
Yeah, so
and when should those be put in place so that they?
So what's kind of happened with that is, we needed a final project that we could give all the analysis for the environmental document, and that's why we kind of pushed for that March 4th meeting that we needed to move forward with something. And so we've already been doing the analysis for that area as it stood at that meeting. If we were to add anything into that right now, that would, that would be setting us back 2 months, and we've already been moving forward with the analysis. So our suggestion is if there's further, that during that public comment, we can bring what the stakeholder suggestions are in the public comment period, because it's essentially already too late to add those things in and analyze them to the document as it stands right now. We've already been moving forward, way too much doing all the analysis we need to do, so.
You asked about the time.
Is that what you're saying? You're saying, can they be added in
When can they be
still
implemented?
before the document?
Right, and
Yeah.
because I know that the number one concern coming from the neighborhood chair from the Wasatch neighborhood, number one concern were safety enhancements for the elementary school, the Wasatch Elementary School. So if that's their number one concern, how does that get, when and where do we talk about those, and then what's the process?
Yeah, I think.
As far as decision making and who makes those final decisions and when from your side?
So what we're planning on doing is that group, I know I heard she was retiring, the
Principal.
principal.
Yeah, and the assistant principals will be.
Okay, so if they're, so they can participate in that group so that we can, hear, those concerns. But it's gonna take some working through with the city as well, because some of the things that are suggested are, not in city ordinance even, so we're gonna have to work with the city and make sure that, all of these things that are being suggested, or we make other suggestions of things that they can do to secure the school. Hopefully we can come up with the things that we want by the time of the public comment period, but even if it's not finalized by then, it's not as if it's done. We can still work through the design after that, but it's gonna take a lot of work on some of those items between the city and UTA, and we can't solve all the problems that everybody wants, but I think we can work something out. But ideally, we can get it in the public comment period. If not, we're still got another design to go through.
I mean, between the stakeholders or the designers, will have to make that determination of, what gets our biggest bang for our buck, and will the budget afford it? Do we include that? Is this something that we, the city or maybe MAG would want to help fund? Can it be a shared cost type of thing, or is this something that, those type of decisions will happen through that preliminary design phase, and really even into the final design phase to it as well. So
I know they're just concerned that early on you said there was no money for the path. It was not included in the project, and that was kind of the answer up until now. And I'm glad to see that that's included. I think that's very important.
We have an opportunity to.
So I appreciate you being able to work that out. And I just wanted, there are certain things that are really important to the neighborhood, to the school, and for those enhancements, certain enhancements just to make it work. And so I appreciate you working on that.
And that's what we want to do in the stakeholder group is, what are some of the big, what are some of the items that we can do that will have the biggest effect, for what we want to have to get for the safety? Is that 10-foot buffer, of a bike and pedestrian path on each side? That's going to give us our biggest bang for the buck. We've talked to FTA about it. We've almost kind of cleared that with them, and they said, yes, that could be that is an acceptable mitigation or enhancement item for number of buses, more buses on the route. So,
And also because it is already included in Provo City's plan as a bike route. So that one was a little bit easier one because FTA's big initiative, pedestrian connectivity, bicycle.
And is that by strip takes? Are you going to accomplish that by strip takes, or are you going to accomplish that by street, using part of the street, or are you, what is the plan that you presented to them? How are you going to make that work?
Yeah, and we haven't finalized the design yet, but we'll present it to that group on June 11th. But we basically just said we would be taking a little more property to FTA in order to accommodate a budget.
But if I might, I think it's very important to note that the advocacy we have observed for the Wasatch neighborhood applies to every neighborhood that will be impacted by this project.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I do have another question.
Please.
The philosophical concern I think that the council's wrestling with is, do we pass a resolution that kind of follows up on our March 4th one that explicitly gives our support to this locally preferred route 4 that has a lot of very specific items listed in it as mitigations for the Wasatch, for the Pleasant View, for the downtown, even for the Waukeet. So all these neighborhoods in Provo where the bus rapid transit's going to go, just to make sure that UTA and FTA understands that if the project is going to go build in Provo, it has to include these things. And the design build using the budget that you have, figure out a way to get all those things in, because that's part of the deal. It has to go with it.
But notice how short-sighted that is.
Well, I'm asking, this is the philosophical
I
challenge.
understand, but understand that position can be viewed as short-sighted.
Well, the other option that we have, based on this resolution, and I've had a chance to look through that, is just to say, we will work together to work these things out as we go along. But it frightens me to hear things like, we can't solve all the problems that everyone wants, that you just said, for example. How will we know that the things that we feel like we really need are going to be done if that's the attitude, and we haven't specifically said these, what the mitigations or adjustments are going to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, what we're also saying is...
We will, at some point, say what the enhancements will be, but to somehow compile the wish list in advance of the design process, as though we know what will be best in the end, seems to me tragically short-sighted.
Well, as I envision it, we're saying in our document, the elementary school, for example, Wasatch Elementary School, has to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're creating the design for that, you need to make sure that you do X, Y, and Z. We're not necessarily saying we want a curb or something, but we want to make sure that the sound is mitigated, that the pedestrian crossing situation is mitigated, so that when they are designing, they know what specifically they're trying to accomplish with those designs.
Yeah, and I'm hoping...
But see, with that, I mean, with that type of a list, you're saying that there is a problem, and right now, as we get into design, there might not be a problem. You know, right now, I mean, is noise even an issue at Wasatch? We feel like with quieter buses, or it's not, you know, going to be an issue. So in order, you know, to have something say that we will put a sound wall in front of the elementary it's at this point in time, it's not.
Again, what I envision, I think the way that they would envision this language is you need to make sure that sound is not an issue. So you get to that point in the design process and you say, you know, if we're using these quiet buses, we don't need a sound wall, but maybe this would work. But at least you know that that's something that you need to pay attention to, rather than just saying, you know, our job is just build this BRT down the street, and anything else is in addition, and we haven't really planned to do any of that stuff. Because originally that was what we were told. You know, when we talked about 9th East, I remember asking that question specifically, and they said, no, there's no money in the budget to remodel 9th East.
And the entire project's going to be a give and take. It is. And when I say we can't solve all of 900 East issues, I don't mean, you know, it's not just the buses. We understand that 900 East has all kinds of issues. It's not even just the buses. And that's really all I was trying to say by that, is that because we are now running buses on that street, we can't solve every problem. You know, we can work with the city and we can come up with a plan, and we can do what we can do, you know, based on the give and takes in the budget along the way. And Provo City can do what they can do, and maybe Matt can help.
So we're just wondering, I'm wondering, how are we going to be comfortable that we're doing all the things that need to be done and not just as many as UTA feels ought to be done or can be done?
Well,
I would rather do what Mr. Miller says and just, let's say we're going to agree later to mitigate these things, but I don't know if, should we have a comfort level that in fact we will get everything that needs to be done if we say that?
Well, that's why we've involved these stakeholder groups, is to help be a part of that design process. So it's not just UTA coming in and saying this is the way it's going to be.
So if the stakeholder groups come with a list, very specific list of things, saying in our neighborhood, this is what needs to be done, how will UTA?
Well, I would hope that a stakeholder would come and we would sit down and go through the design process, and so they can see what the design is going to be, they can see what's going to happen, and then as a group and collectively come up with some solutions to what we're going to do, and not just come with a predetermined list of this is what we want, period.
Sure, and obviously, I don't think any of us want to build things that don't need to be built, and you can understand, I think, maybe my concern is we're just trying to make sure that as this process goes in, that somebody's going to be paying attention to things that need to be done, and not just saying, well, we can't afford it, or we're only going to do half of the things.
I mean, I think we've been really happy that, you know, at any point you wanted us to come back and give you an update on where we are with stuff. We'll come back every single meeting if you want and give you an update on where we are with the stakeholder group, what came out of that stakeholder group, where, you know, this is where it's heading, or, I mean,
Well,
we're
updates will
happy
be
to keep
wonderful,
you
and
involved.
UTA has always been great on the update parts of it. Maybe just one final question from me, and that is, once you have information from the stakeholder groups, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to say, these are things we have to incorporate, or you'll give it to the designers and say, do as much of this as you can, and tell us what we can't do? Or are you going to say, this is,
Well,
I'm just curious what you said.
What we do is we take those back and we try to incorporate what we can. You can see exactly, you know, what the cost is, what the impacts are of bringing those parts into the design. See, I mean, can we do them? Is it feasible to even do? Or is it just, you know, too far out over the edge?
So UTA will basically decide which of those things you can do and which of them you can't.
Well, we come through we go through the process. It's not like just getting information and then it's a working process to where we'll meet, we'll go back and we'll try to incorporate those, and then we go back to the stakeholder group and inform them and show them.
And it's not just us making the decision, your city engineers and FTA will also have a say in that. So, you know, it's tough to sit here and say, we'll do this, and we promise we will, when there's so many people that have to weigh on it still.
We will continue this conversation in 2 weeks' time. It would be helpful, because now that the mayor is here, I don't want to get him involved in this. We'll move on, but in the interim, it would be helpful if you could. This is not in any way a demand, just an invitation, a modest request. It would be helpful if you could provide a case or two from the annals of UTA's working with municipalities that would ease Mr. Hale's concern, that would show him precedence for the process that you can only describe at this point.
Would you like us to provide you names that you can call, city administrators at South Salt Lake or West Valley City, or
Please.
how would you
Please.
just want that?
Could we possibly get a person to bring them in from our other projects and show?
I think that's a great suggestion, and I'd be interested to know, not every project goes perfectly. I'd like to get.
No project goes perfectly.
Well, maybe information on all of them. I know UTA is a professional organization and done a great job in all of these things, but I'd like to hear from some that maybe struggled a little along the way, what they feel like they wish they would have done with UTA in the beginning in order to get maybe something different than what they thought, as well as those that turned out really well.
Well, that might be, we can provide you some names, but that to me sounds like something maybe if we gave you names of people that you wanted to call,
Exactly.
that would be some good conversations of council members to council members, or council members to mayors or city administrators, or kind of the back conversations for you guys to have, see what they say about us trying to interfere, or even just people who will say nice things.
We'll also at the same time take seriously your offer to report at any point. Be sure to invite you with some frequency of these things.
Mr. Brewer, can I ask one more question also?
Yes, please.
On the $75 million that's by local funding, that's our match, is that only, have we got the full 75, or are we only allowed part of it? I know that, I understand that MAG gave us $6.5 million to do our West Side Connected just recently. And are we guaranteed 75 million, or do we have to go back to them if there's a little extra and say, you guys would like a little bit, we'd like to?
Let me address that,
Okay, you can address it.
because I'm dying to say something.
There's also a date on here which it becomes final.
Yes.
I think one thing is we've used the number 75 million, but it's important to know that about $10 million is in kind, and that comes from UDOT. And as this goes down University Parkway, UDOT is donating the land that's equivalent to about $10 million to the project, and we're able to count that towards our 75 million. So you'll hear us talk about 65, and that's why. The cash portion is expected to be 65. And it comes from the division of quarter-cent sales taxes. It's quite complicated and totally separate from West Side Connector or most of the other projects that we're working on. So it comes from a dedicated source of tax revenue for transit. So it is quite secure.
The 65.
The 65 million from the plan. The mayors have committed to it. They have not made the final vote. But I think there's a commitment that that's the direction we're going.
A commitment up to 65 or a commitment on 65?
65.
And also note that 3 million of that is the 2.8 we're spending right now on the design effort, so it's actually 61.
And they'll be bonding, the county is bond, based on the revenue source.
Well, that's what shows here. September 2015.
Thank you.
Thank you each very much. We appreciate your joining us and engaging with us very informatively. The Mayor, welcome. Thank you. We now turn to Brian Jones, the Council Attorney, for a discussion of the annexation petitions for the Smith Northern Hills annexation, northern and southern portions containing a total of approximately 210 acres of real property generally located between 5,000 and 5,500 north on the east side of Canyon Road and extending eastward toward United States Forest Service lands.
Mr. Chair, council members, this item was continued to this date from council meeting a few weeks ago. And at that time, we addressed in council meeting the fact that we have before the council two different petitions regarding some overlapping annexation requests. And in that meeting, we talked about a number of logistical problems with that petition, namely the fact that there were two petitions and that they overlapped to some extent. And principally, we discussed, following other meetings that have been held on the same topic regarding infrastructure improvements that might need to go in for the city to provide services up there. We talked specifically at the last meeting about the fact that there's a state law that says that with regard to annexations by petition, that they may not occur if they leave an unincorporated island or peninsula. And my recollection is that at that meeting, the final result was that there was a motion made to continue this item for a few weeks to give the petitioner an opportunity to see if there was some way to revise or amend the petition in order to not be in violation of that. So in the aftermath of that, I know some members of council staff had some contact with the petitioners. In addition, members of council staff, including Ryan Harvey and myself and Matt Taylor, and also Brian Maxford from Community Development, sat down and looked at the petition areas and the different areas. And the problem that we run into is the same, which is that you see on the picture above the Gillespie property that's highlighted in blue, and that without incorporating the Gillespie property into the annexation, you're faced with the dilemma that the petition, no matter how you rearrange the petition, either leaves a peninsula or creates an island, being the Gillespie property surrounded by other city property. And after discussing and looking at that and not seeing any other options, we notified the petitioner that it was our view that as a matter of law that such a petition could not be granted. I know that the petitioner has had some conversations with some people from the county, and I spoke this morning with Robert Moore, who is one of the county attorneys that handles annexations, and he agreed. Essentially, as we talked, we came to the conclusion that we're in complete agreement about what the statutes mean. But let me clarify that in this way by saying that there are, in fact, two ways to do an annexation. One is by petition, and one is by resolution of the council. And Mr. Moore and I are in agreement that the statute prohibits leaving peninsulas or islands when the annexation is done by petition, but that same prohibition does not apply if the annexation is done by resolution of the council or initiated by the city. And he had further informed me that the vast majority of annexations that are happening in the county right now, and for the past several years, happen by council initiation or city initiation, not by petition. I think he referenced one petition last year. For the most part, petitions have not been the preferred method. They require a lot more noticing, and they're a lot less flexible because of some of these provisions. So, having spoken with Mr. Moore and confirmed that was his opinion on the county's behalf, and also threw out that he did mention to me there's been a couple of petitions that he could think of in the last several years that violated that principle, where the county actually filed protests to the petition because of the fact that they left unincorporated islands of county property. So it is still my conclusion that the petition, as the two petitions as currently drafted, or either one of them taken independently, or any revision of them, cannot legally be granted without the Gillespies signing on to the petition. So with that leaves the council or the city with the option, with essentially, I guess, two options. One is to deny the petition and leave the matter as it is at that point, or for the city to begin a process of considering whether the city wants to initiate the annexation. Now, there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about what the council policy regarding annexation was, and I want to clarify before I say this next part that I'm not in any way suggesting that the council doesn't have the authority or the prerogative to set that policy. I think they do. Clearly they do. But I wanted to clarify one issue, which is that to a certain extent, the council has already set the policy by adopting the annexation map. And what would normally happen, in my view, in a situation where the city is initiating an annexation instead of doing it in response to the petition, is normally, under the way our form of government is set up, is that recommendation to do so would come from the administration. That is, it would be the administration that would decide, hey, there's a piece of property out here that we want to annex, let's go propose to the council that they do so. Which isn't to say that the council doesn't have the prerogative to say, hey, there's a reason we think the administration is missing something. But as I consider it, in my view, it comes down to the question before the council at this point, assuming denial of the petition. The question for the council rather than the administration that I see is, because we know these people are out there that want to be annexed, do we as a council feel like it's incumbent upon us to ask the administration to go forward and do an analysis on this property, even if they wouldn't have done it of their own prerogative? Or, so one is kind of a council constituency response policy question. The other question that could be asked is, even if that were not the case, does the council feel like there is some policy that would be served by annexing this property that they're concerned that the administration is going to miss, and that they should therefore ask the council to go analyze this and come back and tell us what the results of annexing this property are, so we can make an informed decision. Other than those two questions, so I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm probably being too long-winded in saying it, is that the council has the option of asking the administration to go back and do an analysis to serve either of those two purposes, or for letting the matter lie, and if the administration, for their own reasons, thinks that there are reasons that the annexation ought to take place, or are convinced by the petitioner or in response to constituents, they bring a proposal back to the council, then the council could obviously hear the administration's proposal at that time.
Let me just add to Mr. Jones' comments. I think he's summed it up very well, very nicely. I just add that although it is in the general plan, this is an annexation petition area. I think looking at that one policy in a vacuum is not prudent when you try to consider the whole of all council policies. So even though you may have one policy that says, yes, this is an area that should be annexed into the city at some point, you may have other policies such as fiscal sustainability, the type of development along our community, the long-term capital costs that should counterbalance and be taken in as a whole if the council considers whether this is a direction that you would like to pursue or not pursue. And I think that ties into Mr. Jones' comment.
And if I can make one final logistical comment, where that leaves us, kind of regardless of where the conversation goes today, is that the petitions are still out there and have not been finally acted upon. And I believe that it would be our custom practice to act upon the petition in a public hearing setting. So even if the decision today is, of the discussion, if what the council's intent is coming out of this meeting is, we can't grant the petition and we're going to go down some other road, at some point we probably need to continue this item back to the normal council meeting to formally deny the petitions.
Questions of Mr. Jones?
I felt to put it on the notes, but we do have Julie Smith here, who represents the petitioners, as well as Gary Ratcliffe county surveyor, who also had.
Very good. I invite them to come forward.
Appreciate you letting us revisit this. One thing about the sustainability of this, we're just asking to be annexed. We're not coming in with any proposed roads, water, sewer. Nothing will change for any of these owners if we're annexed. So right now, we're just asking to be annexed in to the city. I suppose our power bill may change or something when it comes over from Utah Power Line to Provo, but besides that, nothing is going to change. When we do come forward with a plan at that time, you know, I believe that's a reasonable request to ask for sustainability and zoning and everything else. But right now, we're just asking to become part of the city, just step one. And then I've asked Gary Radcliffe to come speak with you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Okay, I'm not here to take sides. I'm just here to maybe clarify what historically has been going on in the county the last 3 or 4 years. Brian very eloquently talked about his conversation with Robert Moore, the county attorney's office. And Robert is my go-to guy if I have a question about the statute. My responsibility as a county surveyor is to look at the boundary of the proposal, make sure that there aren't any concerns or issues with the boundary as it relates to adjoining parcels and those kinds of things that are city boundaries. And just maybe to reiterate what Brian said, that the resolution process is kind of the thing that most cities now have fallen back to. In the olden days, before that resolution process was created through the state legislature, there were no options. Yet you created a problem. The way the laws were reading at the time, you were to create an island or a peninsula, it was a no-go. And it left a helpless feeling with developers, landowners, because the county had no options but to say no and to contest that. And I think it was American Fork City, I'm not sure, but they were the ones that instigated the push through the state legislature on the resolution process. So what it boils down to is if the city really wants to annex this proposed parcels, I don't think the county is going to contest anything. The resolution process, the public part of that you still have to go through, it allows people to protest and so forth. I mean, this is the early beginning stages of this whole thing. So it's even going through the resolution process, it's not necessarily a guarantee that it will happen to the end. But most cities, in fact, I think over the last 3 years, I've been directly involved with annexing cities. I think once, maybe twice, I've seen a petition process. Everything else has been through resolution. So it's in your court, I guess. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other questions?
I'd just like to ask a question. As it's changed from the petition to the resolution process, have most of the resolutions been because of this island, this peninsula problem? In other words, was the resolution process really put into play to solve that problem, or is it a wider?
That's a good question. I really can't respond to that, except I know in American Fork City's case, and in a lot of cases with Lehigh, we have a lot of islands up there, county islands. And it's been a mess because the county road plows don't want to travel extra miles to push snow for a 1,000-foot stretch of road that really there are other services that the city is been providing to some of those folks. So it's been a blessing, but to answer your question, I really don't know.
Okay.
Something Ms. Smith mentioned may be worth changing a little bit of paradigm here. As this originally proposed, much of the discussion from the development side has been talking about how do we get roads up into this area, how do we service it, how do we get the service area for water and sewer and pressures needed. And, that led me to conjure up quite a substantial amount of development in that area.
Plus your earlier statement.
Yeah, plus my earlier statement, without a specific project plan. I think that is problematic as far as going that far at this point without that type of detail. However, Ms. Smith mentioned saying, well, really our plan right now is to be zoned agriculture. And as I look at the general plan map, it is the general plan. It is for agricultural above the bench, general plan for residential below. So without a project plan, you could potentially initiate that annexation as a council, bring those properties in under the lowest density, which under, well, you could even specify at this point that it remains an agricultural zone, 20 or 40 acre lot, and lot size essentially allow any development. And that would, and then as they come forward, they may need to come back with the general plan amendment. Because right now the general plan is agricultural for much of that area, but especially up on the bench. They would need to get amendment to, and through that general planning process, demonstrate maybe more of the rationale for increased density and development in that area. I don't think that eliminates all the concerns that engineering would probably have. There might be some other issues, but again, that is a different way to look at this problem without having that project plan in front of you.
And besides that, how do we say no to someone who says, I want to be part of Provo City?
So I asked Mr. Hardy to put up this map, and you can see that green line in the unincorporated areas. That's where the division between residential and agricultural in the plan. And you also notice the hash mark, which designates as a developmentally sensitive area, which by policy just means that is a warning note to developers and landowners. There'll be extra review here. No real limitations per se, but there's going to be a heightened level of review and maybe some stricter requirements depending upon what the needs are there.
I recommend that we move this item to our council meeting on the 3rd of June in order to do as Mr. Jones recommended, and to put an end to the petitions. And I'm going to ask something rather unusual of you two gentlemen, if you don't mind, Mr. Williams and Mr. Garrett. And that is, if you could arrange prior to that meeting to meet with Mr. and Ms. Gillespie and to talk through the issue with them. I know that we have received, the council received a letter, handwritten letter from Mr. Gillespie about the matter some weeks ago. But would you please visit with them in a personal way? I would not in any way want you to disclose anything that is private or confidential from that meeting. Mayor, at the same time, if you would prefer that your representative accompany them, by all means.
It might be good if you give me a sec to let us know, and particularly if we're going to be, if there is a requested administration, that would be good for us to be.
Exactly.
Thank you, I'd love to.
Thank you. Very good. Anything more? Thank you. Mr. Ratcliffe, Ms. Smith, thank you very much. And now, to Travis Paul, the Director of Energy, and Kat Linford, the Energy Efficiency Coordinator, for an update on automated metering information, that is AMI for Provo City Power. And entourage.
And entourage, yes, the entourage is the most important. I have some things to look at here. You don't want to listen to an engineer talk without something to look at, right? Thanks, council. I appreciate the opportunity to come and discuss this with you, because I think this is a very important item. Because what we're offering the residents of Provo with this program is very important. To the residents, I believe, it gives them information they've never had in the past. That's what the purpose of this program is, to really put the billing system in the residents' home so they can see how much energy they're using. Right now, you think about it, you get a bill every month, it says you use 1,000 kilowatt hours. You have no idea where those 1,000 kilowatt hours, and most people, I would say, don't even know how much they're really paying for power. From my perspective, power cost is a cheap form of energy, very cheap when you look at some other forms of energy. But people don't understand how cheap it is to generate power at a power plant, transfer it hundreds of miles, get it to a home, and to use at the cost that you do, about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, is a phenomenal deal. And we want every customer in the city of Provo to understand how they're using energy and have that power. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
And may I say, as a behavior analyst in my side life, there's probably no better way to encourage conservation use than providing real data.
Well, I think our thing's done. It sounds like you guys already know. So I appreciate that. That's true. That's true. And so first off, I just wanted to introduce some of the people here from the power department. I have Scott Bunker, who will talk about, after we talk about AMI, he'll talk about our facility plan. And then Kat Linford, who was in charge of our key accounts in the city and our conservation program. I'll hand this over to her towards the end of this presentation. She'll talk about some of the challenges and conclusions. I'll start by talking about the benefits of having the AMI program. If you look at every home in the city has a meter that measures their electrical consumption. And for 100 years, this is the meter that people use. It's called an electromechanical meter. You go outside, it has these dials. It operates on electromagnetic fields. And I should say also, if I start getting into engineer speak, or if you have questions, just stop me, and because I really want you to understand. I don't want to go into acronyms. I start talking in acronymies, and that's probably not good. So please stop me. But this meter, the electromagnetic field causes this wheel to turn, and that's what measures the energy. And we have to send out a meter reader to every home in the city to tell you how much energy you've used during the month. And so what happens is we have about 30,000 of these meters out there. We send meter readers out. They have this handheld. They go into the backyards of people's homes all throughout the city once a month, and they type in how much energy usage each person has used. You don't know when it was used, but that's what they used. And there's really not any arguments. It's kind of hard to call in the customer service rep and say, I really didn't use that much energy. Well, the meter says you did, so it must be right. Well, in 1996, we thought, well, let's try another type of metering. We started with an AMR system. We started with an AMR system, an automated meter reading system. So we started installing these type of meters, which are solid state meters. It doesn't have the little wheel, has a digital readout. But these have radio frequencies that send out the reading once a month. Well, it's always sending out a signal. It's called a bubble up radio frequency. So when the meter reader goes by there, he doesn't have to go into the backyard and get the reading, but he walks by it, and the radio frequency sends the reading here, and he just goes by it. So what did that do? It decreased some of our time of sending that meter reader out. He still had to walk by the resident, but he didn't have to walk in the backyard to get that read. So that was a good improvement. And we didn't have to, there's some privacy concerns when you have somebody going in people's backyards. And
Dogs.
Dogs. You have some risk when you're sending people throughout the city doing that type of thing. So that helped out.
Even from the road, does the signal?
Yes. They're just walking by the meter and they'll get the connection. And then the next meter, they have to go type it in. And then the next meter is a radio read. We have about 4,500 to 5,000 of these out in the city. We thought it was a good program. We put the meters in hard-to-reach locations. It was a great deal. But then we started thinking, you know, we're still sending a meter reader out. We still have the cost for doing that. We don't get a lot of more information. So we thought, let's go to the next step. About 10 years ago, we started looking at AMI, which is different than AMR. Automated meter reading is a one-way communication. It just bubbles up that radio frequency all the time. AMI is a two-way communication. So from the office, we could say, you could ping it like a computer. You could say, talk to me, meter, and then it sends back a signal. So it's a two-way communication. And there are some benefits with that. You could put disconnects in the meter. So you wouldn't have to send out somebody to disconnect power and reconnect power. When you pay your bill, if you forgot to pay a bill for a month and you got your power disconnected, right now we have to send someone out there to reconnect that power, and that costs a considerable amount of money. So what's the next stage? We wanted to go this AMI, so we started looking at it. We put out RFPs. We started budgeting for this type of program. We actually sent out 3 requests for proposals. But each time we send it out, we got the proposal back. We looked at the cost. The cost was significantly more than what we were willing to pay, and the benefit actually wasn't what we wanted. This last RFP we put out in November, we finally got some of the answers that we thought would make sense for us. We did the cost-benefit analysis. We believe we can get a payback on a new AMI system in 7 years. Now, 7 years sounds a lot for communication companies, people like that, but for a power company, get a payback and continue realizing those savings after 7 years is significant. We always look for paybacks in the 30-year range, right? We buy power plants, it's about 30 years to get a payback. So 7 years is a great deal. And we put a lot of information, we give a lot of information to the customer. So we started looking at the benefits, and here's a list of those benefits. Enhanced customer service. When they call in, we can tell them on an hourly basis what people were using for energy with this kind of system. Improved reliability. Each meter, we can tell when the power goes out before the person knows the power's out. Right now, we rely on customers to call us to tell us when their power is out. With this type of AMI system, it'll send us a signal and we'll know when the power's out before we even get the call. And we'll know which area, so we can send people to the correct area quickly. We can manage cost. There's a lot of things we can do to decrease our cost. Conservation, Councilman Miller said, operational efficiency, new services, and new sources of demand. And I'll talk about all those benefits as we go through these slides. First off, an AMI system is a network, basically. You're putting a computer on every home that reads hourly data, real-time data, and sends it back. In addition to that, it gives us information like voltage at the home. Right now, we know what the voltage is at our substation, and we hope that when it gets to the residents, we still have a good quality service. I would say we do, but if you get a long distance from a substation, you might have low voltage. We don't know that right now. We get a call from a customer. They say they have problems. We send someone out to look at it. Then we send a meter person. We might have 3 or 4 contacts because of that one call, just to make sure the voltage is okay. This type of meter will tell us if they have a problem. Like here, we can produce power bills from it. We can ensure customers are getting good quality power. We can assist with outage identification. And the great thing about this is, I believe, is you can have a web portal on your phone. You can look at it. If you want to know what you're on vacation and your kids are at home and you want to know what they're doing, you can look on here to see if how much energy they're using. Now, the reason I say that, right, is because I've gone on vacation and left my 20-year-old, and they seem to go to the thermostat and they turn it from the setting I have at 78 degrees in the summer. Well, they turn it down to 68 degrees. I don't know that until I get the next monthly bill and it's increased by $20, $30. What happened? Well, I find out later that it's that kid that's gone down and increased decreased the temperature for the air conditioner to run all the time. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can see with this system. some benefits that the customer will derive from that. And I also say, right now, it's like you go to a gas station, you fill up your car with gas, and you don't know, for a month, you go to the gas station, you fill up your car, you don't know how much you've used, and after a month, you get this bill telling you you owe $500 worth of gas. That's kind of disconcerting, but you think about it, that's what we do with the power bills. What we really want is when you go to the gas station, you can see the dials, you can see you're using 10 gallons or 12 gallons and what the cost is. I think for a consumer, that would be very important to understand how much energy they're using on a monthly basis. The system that we are proposing would be something like this. We would put out 36 relays, which are small antennas. They go on a pole. Most people wouldn't even see them. And then they would have a collector at the substation that would communicate. We have fiber around all of our substations. We'd take that fiber and we'd bring all the data back through our fiber system to the head end, to our billing system, where it'd be incorporated into the billing system. So it's very non-intrusive compared to the other electrical facilities we have up on poles. Here's just another list of things that we put in. We can reduce costs. We believe we can reduce costs, our overhead costs for sending trucks out on customer issues. With this system, we can ping that meter. We can see if there's power to the meter, and we can tell the customer if it's on our side or if it's on their side. If it's on their side, we can talk them through how to trip their breaker, turn the breaker on so they can get their own power on without rolling the truck. Every time we roll a truck with alignment, you're talking $200 to $400. And so that's a big cost for us when we do that. Reduction in theft. Right now we have, I think our statistics show we catch about 1%. If you look at industry-wide, the average is around 3%. Now, in Provo, most people are more honest. Let's say that. So maybe we won't catch anybody, but with a system like this, we will be able to catch some of the theft issues sooner. Improved customer service and improved distribution grid management. Yes?
Quick question about theft. Do you mean people tapping into the power line and using?
Yes, absolutely. And you think about it, we have issues where people come out and take the meter off, they jump our power. There's things like that happen all the time, and we have to fine them. We fine them if they do tamper with our meters. It becomes a policing issue for us. And we don't like to be the police. That's what other departments are for. And by the way, I just saw Clint Boyers back here. He's in charge of our metering department. So if there's any questions, technical questions, he's the one that can answer. Oh. This would be the type of meter that we install, which should look very similar. This is an AMI meter compared to the AMR meter. You really can't tell the difference between the two, but you can see what they look like. The good thing about these two is they have a disconnect that's inside the meter. And that was one of the big issues we had in the past. To install a disconnect like this was over $200 for each individual home. Now we can get the meter with all the voltage information, kVA, engineering words, power factor, all that kind of stuff out of the same meter for about $170. And that's why we think this is a great deal for us to do now. As we talked to the meter vendors, they told us there's meter pressure now to start increasing the price. We've seen the meters decrease to a point where we think it's pretty close to the floor now. And with all the information they're getting now, there's some other pressures trying to push the price up. Yes, ma'am?
Can you give us a sense, maybe this is a current question, about how many disconnects we'll have at the end of the school year?
That is a Karen question. I know. Oh, Dustin has, okay. Dustin's here
Just put this in
too.
perspective as to when he says a disconnect, what are you talking about?
Right, and for a college town like we have, where we have college students coming in and out, we have what we call rush week in April and August, where we have a lot of people coming in, bills changing. Sometimes they don't pay. Sometimes you have to disconnect. I mean, there's all those type of things. You can do it from the office now just to disconnect the power. And then once they pay, connect it without sending the person out there. That's where we get the biggest return on investment by putting these meters out in the field. Dustin, Dustin here is our financial analyst.
Yeah, so I put it in the pricing model but I think Clint has a better handle on it, he's more close to it, but it's about 200 a day during those transition weeks for about 2 weeks or longer. So we're talking in the thousands of disconnects that we could then do remotely as opposed to sending someone.
You know what we're charging Dustin for disconnect?
I don't know. Yeah. We
When they
spend
said after real-
$150,000 every year on all of our disconnects and all kinds of field services, which are similar things that could be done remotely.
And we did look at that as part of the model. What happens if we don't have to send the truck out? That's part of our return on investment that we have a model for, and that we're looking at getting a savings.
It's also a really good customer service issue. Someone comes in to pay a bill after a disconnect or transfer. By the time they get home, power's back on, as opposed to having to wait to roll a truck and get in the queue. And, it could be several hours before we actually get somebody out there. This way, it's instantaneous.
You think about it. Sometimes we've got calls where a person wants to move into their apartment. They're coming from California. They get here. The mom calls upset because we won't go out and turn the power on Saturday or Sunday. We have to wait for Monday. Unless you want to pay for the overtime charge, that's an extra $100. Or, you can see where that becomes an issue for us, and it happens every year.
Is the device tamper-proof?
Yes. There's some ways that you can see if there's tampering. Actually, if this is removed without doing it properly, it sends a tamper report right to the billing system, so you know instantaneously when that's been tampered with. So it has so much more information than these old electromechanical relays or meters. There's some other things you could, as a customer, you could say when I want the bill due on a 30-day billing cycle, when you want it due. You could combine, if you own apartments in one area of town and another, and have all those on the same billing cycle. There's just a lot of things that you could do as a customer that would help your billing be a lot better than it is now. Prepay options, yes, Matt?
I was just going to say the fee schedule shows that net processing fees $20.
Yeah, which would not even cover the labor for the person doing the work, let alone the work.
Same day connect fees and after hours connect fees.
We're very good to our customers in that respect because it doesn't cover the cost of something. Prepay options, we could make sure that we could have students pay up front. Young people, they're always paying up front, and then it'd be like you pay, and once you put $100 in, and once the $100 is gone, it disconnects. You pay again, or you have an app on your phone that tells you when you're getting close to that. You prepay your energy instead of post-pay, which would help. Think about some customers that can't seem to get their bill paid on time. This would be an option for them. I've heard of examples, the presentation last night, right, Gary? The person said that they had their power disconnected 70 times during the year, and they were happy about it because it was something they chose, and they realized it was their choice, which I thought was an interesting concept. We don't get anybody that's happy when they get 70 disconnects in a year, I can tell you that. Time of use rates. We talked to a commercial business owner, sent a letter to the mayor, and that's one thing that he would really want, some way to charge him and kind of a time of use. So if you're using power during the peak time of the day when it costs more for the city to generate power, that is when they get the highest cost power. So they can shift their usage and get lower cost power if they want that. Right now we can't do it, but in the future with these type of meters we can do a time of use rate, which, like Councilman Miller said, it would help conservation. You could shave peak and really drive down the cost for the utility, and that's really what we want in what we have. Verification reads, move in, out, virtual disconnect, new service orders. All of these are excellent benefits that we will get in addition to giving the customer more information. Now, Kat said I shouldn't even put this slide on because this is engineering stuff, but really all this says is we want to track every customer out in the field and keep track of how reliable our system is. And we want to be the most reliable system in the United States. That's what our goal is. That's what we want. And a system like this will help us reach that sooner.
On the cost, so you said it would help reduce the bill over time, but initially, is that something that the customer would opt to pay for, or is that something you would put in, and does that affect fees, or how would you pay for that initial installation?
The initial installation from our side,
If you're going to install this on someone's home, who pays for that and how?
I'll tell you, we've been budgeting for that for the last 10 years. We budgeted about $250,000 a year. We have, yes, about 8 years. We have about $2.1 million for this project already in our CIP. We have another $700,000 budgeted for this year, and probably another $1 million next the year after that. So we've been budgeting to do the program. Now, well, I'll show you. The next slide, we'll talk about the cost a little bit. The thing that we think is neat about this system, it's an open architecture. It's an IPv6 network. The security is built into it, same security that financial institutions use, the Department of Defense. We think it's a secure system, but more than just the energy efficiency, advanced metering, distribution automation, where we'll be able to control switches out in the field remotely on the distribution network to get power back on quicker. But we also believe, since it's on an open network, that applications will be written in the future that we can't even fathom today, that we'll be able to use this network to put on. If you think about your apps on your phone, Google apps, or things that are done by BYU students, they're the ones that are going to push this technology. Maybe we can't think of it, but somewhere, something down the road, we'll be able to use technology that's produced by some brilliant engineer that we can put on this network. And you think about it now, we're looking at trying to incorporate electric cars that is going to tax our electrical system. How do we size our equipment? How do we make sure that we don't burn up electrical equipment? We need the information. That's kind of what the engineering application is for the system.
You touched on security. There are 2 neighborhood chairs who approached me about security concerns regarding this system. You may not consider yourself an expert in such matters, but could you just speak in a general way to how privacy and private information will be secured?
Absolutely, and I'm going to hand that off to Kat, because she does have our next portion of this presentation. I'm giving you the benefits. I'm giving the Kat the hard job to tell you there will be concerns with the system, and she will kind of go through those concerns. And the real purpose of talking to you today is we want to tell you how excited we are about this, but we think that there will be concerns by the public when this comes out. People will have privacy concerns and other things, and Kat will discuss those. Finally, I just wanted to show you the pilot program that we're moving ahead with. We believe we had a recommendation from 3 members of the Energy Board last night. We're trying to get the rest of the board to make sure we're on the right track. But we believe we'll do the pilot program for about $313,000, and the full rollout over a 3-year period will cost us about $6 million. That money is budgeted in our CIP, so it's part of our CIP. It will not hit any individual customer, but it is part of our capital improvement plan. And like we said, we've been planning this for 10 years. We've just been waiting to get the technology and the cost at a level that we felt comfortable with rolling it out.
But not large enough to be revenue bond.
No, we don't plan on doing any bonding for this project.
And what will the pilot consist of?
Pilot will consist of how many meters?
1,500 meters. We'll probably do the west side of the freeway, the southwest side of the freeway, and up towards the airport.
We're trying to eliminate a route, so a route that the meter readers go. In addition to that, we have capacitor banks that we are going to control with this system. We are looking at how do you do demand response, demand side management. We're going to make sure that we can do some of the things that we might look at in the future. The council thinks it would be a good idea. We just want to make sure that the technology will work. If it works, then we hope we'll roll out the rest of the program over the next few years.
What were you referring to specifically when you mentioned electric cars?
Electric cars need a place to plug in. When they do that, they use a high amount of energy. Right now, if you go to the Walgreens, there's a charging station there. If every individual puts a charging station on their home and everybody plugs their electrical car in at the same time, we will overload our transformers, overload the infrastructure, burn up wire, basically. We obviously do not want to burn up our wire because that costs a lot of money to replace it, and the utility would have to cover those costs. So we want to make sure that we have the ability to control those costs.
Are you informed now about where the supply is located at a private residence?
Where the meters are? Yes.
The electric charge outlet.
No, we don't know. We don't know who's put those in their personal residence. It'd be like a 240 volt outlet that you run your oven off of, but it would require a lot of power in a short amount of time. And that's what we're worried about. If they use that power at night, that's great because we have the generation and you're not using other equipment at the same time. And you can lower your peak. In fact, what they talked about is you charge at night and then you can plug it in during the day during peak times, and they can actually feed back into the grid. If you think about it, you can feed back into the grid and lower demand. So you can work that both ways with electricity. So those are things, as a board that sets rates, you guys will have the opportunity to set those type of policies to incentivize either conservation or, right now we just have a rate that everybody uses. We really don't worry about when people use their energy. But with this kind of technology, we can start looking at ways of encouraging the right type of usage. Okay?
Mr. Van Buren.
Just one question maybe, and maybe it's to the mayor and Wayne. About 2 years ago, 2 months, Merrill Bingham made a presentation, same kind of presentation with the water meters. I don't remember, maybe we have had a report back. Do you feel comfortable with accomplishing the goals that were set out when we switched the water?
Might be good to ask Dave Decker to just give us a quick update on where we are in the transition.
We have about 25% of our water meters that are already AMI meters, so it's very similar technologies from different companies, Neptune meters that we're using for the water meters. But one of the things that I really like is the ability you can actually have your residents be able to download some software, and they can actually simultaneously what they're using. If the tap's running, they can see I'm using 5 gallons a minute or 50 gallons a minute. One thing I'm not quite sure on energy, but if we have a continuous flow, if there's a flow for more than 24 hours and it's continuous, we can actually get a warning back from that meter and say this resident may have a leak. We can notify the resident. That's one of the big benefits.
And has that been?
It is.
You're seeing that.
We are using that already, and probably that alone is one of the biggest savings for public works. So we're about 25% through the installation process for water meters.
Kate, would you like to see a fuller report?
No, I was just curious I didn't know how far into we had gone.
It's fairly parallel.
And I guess there's no interface. In other words, you're going to put some monitors up on posts, and therefore there's no way to use common
different systems, but they all interact with the billing system, so that's where everything comes on boost.
Neptune for water, Jupiter for sparks.
That's right. We apologize. I know there was an effort made at one point to see if we could use a common company, and I don't think they could get everything that each
Neptune is a water company, and they don't really deal with it. But we did, this handheld is a Neptune because we were being synergetic at one time. Synergy or something like that. I would say that if we have if we have continuous flow of electricity and it's not wanted, then when we do that, we blow things up. So that happens really quickly. So we don't have anything like that.
Good point, well made. Ms. Lynn?
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we will face. Us as a department, as a city, council members, it's going to be a hot topic. for several customer citizens about the concerns of AMI or smart grid, smart metering. So that's what I'm here to kind of give you the education so that you can talk to your constituents and citizens and anybody that's concerned, so that you have an idea going into this what we are doing, that there isn't any danger, anything wrong with the system that we're going forward with. So the perception is privacy. There's privacy concerns, and that there's radio frequency that's harmful to people. So the metering system that we're going with, it fully complies with the United States Federal Communication Commission's. So it is safe. It's been tested. It's been studied. So there isn't any issues as far as what radio frequencies are going to do to anybody. They're just as they're lower on the frequency level than your cell phones are, and I'll show you that in a minute. Privacy concern. So everybody's aware, because we're a city, we're a public entity, we have to be careful and have all of our customers' information private. We have to keep it all private. So we abide by the state code. This is just a snippet of that code, but no agency shall disclose any record which is contained in a system of records by any means of communication to any person or to another agency, except pursuant to written request. Subpoenas for court, warrants, anything like that. If Chairman Hales, if you wanted to call downstairs and say, hey, I need to get my neighbor's consumption information, they're not going to give it to you. And hopefully everybody knows that and is aware of that with anything else, not even just the city. But you can't call up somebody else's insurance company and ask for their information. You can't call up their cable company and ask for information. It's just a private information that we abide by the state code. Another concern is inaccurate billing. Customers have assumed that because we have these meters and we can talk to it, communicate with it, that we can charge customers more for their energy consumption. We cannot. It's just we're billing on what the meters are saying. These are actually more accurate. Studies have tested and proved they're more accurate than these older meters anyway. These meters get dirty, they slow down, and these are inaccurate and can be billed incorrectly, where these AMI meters have not. Another concern is forced involvement. Customers feel maybe that they are forced to do this. They don't have to do this smart metering. We're talking about figuring out how to do an opt-out program for the customers. However, those customers need to know that if we're implementing this throughout the whole city, that if they want an older meter, they're going to want to have a truck roll. They're going to want to have personnel come out and read their meter every month. They won't get the benefits of having real-time data. So there's a cost that goes into that. We have to still keep somebody on staff to go read the meters, then we still have to pay for that. So the customers aren't forced to do it, but they have to understand what they would have to do to not do it.
So they'll have a charge to have someone come out and read their meter every month?
Yes.
What would that be?
That'll be, you are the rate-making body, so we'll bring our suggestion back, but that would be something that you would discuss and make that cost. But on the average, I think the average is $40 to $50 a read.
A month.
A month.
On top of your utility bill.
More than what they have then?
Yes, that would add $40 to their bill right off, and that's significant. But we would bring that and you'd discuss what that opt-out charge would be.
So one of the other major concerns that customers have is health. We've heard some stories and some issues that customers have had that they've gotten sick because of a smart meter. We actually had a customer post on our Facebook page that they were sick and they were attributing it to a smart meter. We don't have smart meters yet, so we don't know what they were getting sick from, but it wasn't a smart meter. So there's been studies proving that there is no illness related to smart meters. So that's one of the biggest concerns that you will probably hear as council members, just from concerned citizens about how it's going to affect their health. To lead into that a little bit, the radio frequency signals. How many of you have your cell phones right by you right now? I'm counting the computers. Both of those are putting off more radio frequency signals than the meter, one smart meter would for this entire building right now. So the smart meters are not harmful, are not dangerous. And we are using every day the cell phones and the computers more so than we would even know the smart meter first works.
Yeah. And those smart meters too, for just a few seconds per day, about 45 seconds per day, are actually sending out signals as well. So
Most of the time they're dormant, so
Yeah.
they're only sending out an average 60 seconds a day. And I think the median is 45, but it's not a lot of actual transmitting.
So here's another chart that kind of the same thing. It shows you the different frequency. But if you'll notice here, smart meter is here. How many of you have televisions in your home? How many of you use your cell phone? How many of you have ever used a baby monitor or have kids or grandkids that use baby monitors? Those are all in the same frequency. The other major item that's not on here is cordless telephones. What's the megahertz for those?
19 megahertz or 1.2 gig, and these meters are 19 megahertz.
So your cordless phones at home are operating at the same level. These are just some studies, and we can get this information to you. Radio frequency reports, these are independent studies done by different companies. And then these are utilities that have done studies on the smart metering programs. So our next steps, as Travis mentioned, we did have our board meeting last night. We just had only 3 members there, so we didn't have a quorum to actually pass a resolution or recommendation. But in the past meetings that we've had with them, educating them on AMI and what we want to do with it, we feel that they're all in favor of it, and we will get to you the recommendation from the council or from the board members. But we believe that we have full support from our energy board. Public information and education starts here. This is where we want you to ask questions, make sure that you feel comfortable with what we're doing moving forward. We're going to reach out to the neighborhood chairs, hold public meetings at the utility office, social media. We're going to do everything we can to get the word out there and stay ahead of the curve and make sure that people understand the studies and what's going on before we get a lot of people coming back to us saying that this is harmful or dangerous. So our timeline, we did our energy board presentation last night. Visiting with you today. We have our RFP that we're ready to finalize, and we're hoping to get a contract signed by the end of June. And then we'll start the networking for the pilot program in September, go through the meter install, and then start with the commercial deployment in February. So, any questions?
I stepped out, but did we answer your question about security?
Indeed. Yes. Impressively. And answered the question, the follow-up question was, is there an opt-out provision? So,
Other than the direct fiber to the NSA offices, I'm not aware of any. They'll be closing.
I thought you remembered that before.
Just a quick one. So is this going to be a dedicated network just for this purpose? I mean, we're not using this wireless network.
No, this is solely just for the AMI. Here's a handout that you're welcome to copy, distribute, however you want to move forward with it. It's just an explanation of what radio frequency is, and then it has a chart on here similar to what I showed up there. Microwave, cell phone, your smart meter, a Wi-Fi router, and your FM radio or TV broadcast. So it kind of shows you what those frequency levels are.
May I invite any council members that have concerns, maybe you're not comfortable bringing them here, or maybe you come across them later, to let us spend time with you, the Energy Board, or Kat, or Travis, as well as be happy to sit down with any constituents that have concerns and spend the time with them. You can see this pretty aggressive timeline, and there's something out there that's harboring and we don't address it, then it would be a mistake.
Which comparable city or cities would you recommend?
That have a system
Yes.
like this?
Yes.
Spanish Fork has a similar system right now. They are using a point-to-point network that talks to a radio tower. They put towers in the city, but it's point-to-point. This system is what you call a mesh, so it doesn't rely on just a point-to-point line of sight. It can bounce off other meters to get to the place, which increases reliability from a 95% to a 99.9%. We figured we want to get to 99.9% if we're going to go through the cost of doing it. The Spanish Fork has a system, Beaver, Nephi in UMPA, and they all use a census type system that would be very similar to what we're talking about here.
And for how long in Spanish Fork?
The Spanish Fork is on their second AMI deployment, so they've gone through considerable costs on
This is a UMPA initiative in some sense?
No, it isn't. Each individual city can do it, but they did an AMI project. The last one they've done, they probably rolled it out 5 years ago. Was it about 5 years ago? So they've had it in service about 5 years.
And can you explain to them why they're on their second system? We hopefully will never have to do that, so that we don't need it next season, we don't want to deal with that.
Right. I think they started off with when the AMI first came out, they started to deploy a system. They found out that the reliability was very low. They had issues with the communication. So they scratched that system. They went to a different census system. I think are they happy with their system now, Clint?
I think every budget themselves is unhappy with it, but I've heard rumors.
Right. And that was one reason we went out with the RFP about the same time they did, 8 years ago, probably before they did, but we didn't feel comfortable with the technology. This system has been deployed in, I can't remember, 1.5 million, can you remember? I think they have 1.5 million meters out. PG&E, very large utility down in San Diego, Oklahoma, gas and electric. There's some large utilities, Notre Dame, South Bend has a system, Florida, there's a utility in Florida. So we're not on the cutting edge anymore, but I do feel like if we don't move soon, then we're behind the curve of getting our customers the information that they need.
I think one of the concerns about these meters has been it's a good and it's a bad thing. Being able to monitor the electric use, and so you can go to off-peak times, then the pricing strategies go in place to where if you use the power at the off-peak times, you get a break on your electric. If you use it on the high-peak times. My concern with that is there's some maybe companies or some procedures that they don't have a choice to change their electric use to the off-peak period. So they're punished or discriminated against because they don't have a choice of that. But now, because of this pricing strategy that follows these electric meters, which I think you would say that's part, I think you've already mentioned it, but that would be an option that we can go to. How do we, like, who makes that call? In other words, it seems like there's some potential there for favoritism, not in a, I like you better and so I'm going to give it to you, but because you use it at night, you get a better rate than you use it at day. But maybe your company only can use it at day. So that's some of the problem I see.
I think you're right. I'll give you the easy answer. You are the ones that are going to make that call. I mean, from my perspective, that's the answer. But obviously, we'll give the recommendation. I would say that we would never want to hurt customers. So there'll probably be a mixture. It'd be like an opt-in. If you think you can decrease your peak usage and spread that out, and you think you can get your kids to do it, and as a resident, you want to do that, I would say it would be an option for them to do it. But I wouldn't suggest that we would change all of our rate structures to do every business to do a time of use rate. I would recommend that you have options for businesses to do it. If they can't work at night and they have to work during the day during the peak time, I mean they would keep the same structure that they have now, which it wouldn't give them opportunity to decrease the rates like you could if you had a time of use, but it wouldn't increase the rates. significantly.
Here's a great way to look at it. Our model right now is probably the most expensive way, because we're budgeting and buying power for our peak capacity. This allows us to offer people a lower energy rate if they use it in the other time, not to penalize those, because we're already paying the optimal rate for the high peak users. Potentially, that actually puts a relief for the high user as well, because there's overall cost savings in the system. So does that make sense? Meaning, let's suppose that your businesses can't change, somebody else can. By them changing, that actually helps you, because there's less demand now at the time you're using energy. And that potentially can only help you.
If the philosophy of rate changes reflects that.
Which and Travis has made a great point. Is
I mean, that would be the.
Yeah, but overall into the system, there's a savings, not an extra cost.
Would you anticipate that policy being established prior to the test run, so to speak?
No, in fact, we're hoping to put the metering out there. We would get data back. We could make better recommendations to this board.
Those changes come after it's been in place.
Right.
Have the data.
Frankly, we look at the cost of service. We look at a cost of service model. Dustin, our financial analyst, would look at all the data, and we would see how we could correlate. If we could decrease our demand, put off buying new resources in the future, new power plants, those are all savings to citizens of the city. So that's kind of what we're trying to flatten out that curve, help people use more energy in the evenings, lower the demand, and we don't have to buy expensive power in a short period of time during the day.
Are these very dependable? So the last 50 years?
Well, I asked for 30. I said in the RFP we need 30 years out of these meters. That's what we're going for. They say 20 years. It's a 20-year life that they tell us, and that's pretty typical for a AMI meter.
20 years is pretty good point for a solid state, which basically is so, 20 years out of the computer.
We've had these out for about 20 years, right? These solid state meters, about 1996.
Some of the older solid state meters have had out since 96.
Right.
So they're still functioning and they're working just fine.
But we're past the 7 year.
Yes, we are past the 7 years.
7 years.
We're making money after the 7 years. Anyway, that's what our models tell us.
So kind of random question, but do other cities that are part of UMPA that don't have these meters, if they're using it during peak time, does that do anything to what our peak time rates are, or is it everything separate by city? Does that make sense?
I don't think that we have a time of use rate out there in any city with UMPA. So I think they probably give the customer information, but they haven't instituted a rate for time of use. And frankly, Provo is kind of the biggest user of power there, so you wouldn't see a lot of change with a Salem or
I know
with
they do
Spanish
public
Fork.
outreach, like my kids got a little packet that said, you know, what time is good for municipal power. I know
Yes.
they're doing sort of public outreach type, but they don't.
Right, it's all choice right now. There is no incentive to use it at different times. But frankly, with this kind of system, we could send out text during the day if we see power go very expensive. This winter, with the polar vortex on the East Coast, if you're watching that, there was a time that we could buy power. We normally buy power around $50 per megawatt, which is 5 cents per kilowatt hour. That price went up to $200, $300, or 20 to 30 cents because of all the natural gas they had to use during that really cold time during the winter. Prices are volatile with natural gas, and that's what happens. So if we had a price signal like that, we could send out a text with a system like this, say, please conserve, it's up to you, but please conserve your power right now to drop our overall cost. That's kind of what I see right now if we didn't institute a time. Put it on the consumer.
We just bought a dishwasher recently that has a 3-hour delay, and I have yet to use it because I have no incentive. You know, at 6 o'clock when I'm done with dinner or 7 o'clock, put it in, start the dishwasher, and I don't think twice about it. But if I thought I could shave $10 off my energy bill, I would go to use that programmable feature and make that thing run at 1 in the morning.
if I could change gears, I have Scott Bunker here that has a little discussion on our campus plan, and that's another big item. Is that okay if we move to?
You said that you were planning on a major public education campaign.
Yes.
Now we know why that arena appears in the
Yes,
in the new campus master.
Thanks.
While we're transitioning, can I make a comment? And this is one I can't take credit for because leaders, even before Travis, made some really, I think, good decisions to start budgeting for this. To resist the temptation to jump in and be an early adapter and wait till the technology was right. But I think there's a lot of really fiscally cool things that were heard that lead us to this point today, where we don't have to bond to do this, and where we're getting good technology. So hats off to those.
That's very impressive.
All right, well, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. This is somewhat, do we turn the lights on? Is that right? It's dark here, so just a little bit. Want to show you some features here. It started with Provo a little over 20 years ago, and one of my first assignments under Mayor Jenkins and then the director at the time, Ron Reitman, was to look at our campus and see if there's ways that we could run more efficiently, do things a little better, because things weren't quite fitting our crews. Populations increased, the number of crews that we had for the location has increased, and it was difficult. That kind of got put off, and by the next time Mayor Stewart came in, I was put with one of our new computer guys, Jeff Wilson, and we were asked to do the same thing. So we put together some drafting and some drawings with some new ways to deal with this campus, but the timing wasn't just right. You know, funding and that wasn't there. We weren't in a situation where we felt like we had a window of opportunity to do that. Forward a couple more years under Mayor Billings, same type of situation. I was put again on another committee and a group within the department to do some similar things. And we came up again with some other designs to help our facilities out and make sure that we function a little bit better and be able to serve our citizens better. But again, that window of opportunity wasn't quite right. And then a little over a year ago, with Wayne Parker was serving as our acting director at the time, this issue came up again. And I was given the opportunity to put together the RFP for this project, and again, to look at our overall campus, how it's operating, how can we improve our efficiencies with our crews to serve our citizens better. And we feel like right now we've got a pretty unique opportunity, window of opportunity that we haven't had in the past. I'm just going to go through real quickly today, just kind of a brief introduction, talk about some of our facility needs, a needs assessment that was done on our property and a master plan recently by an architect here in town that we contracted with, some proposals that have come out of that master planning process, and then a brief conclusion. But just to give you a brief history of an introduction of this, Provo's population back in 1940 when the power plant was first built was 18,000. And as you can see, obviously we've exploded over the years up to the last census in 2010 to 112,000 plus. Continuing to project in the future about 2% of growth per year for the city of Provo. And so that the growth continues and our needs continue that we need to meet with our crews and our efficiencies in our department. And so one of the things that we were asked to do by the administration was plan for the next 30 to 50 years. How can we meet the needs of the citizens and our department over the next 30 to 50 years? And so, as you know, the power plant was originally constructed back in 1939 with an addition back in 1963, about what it is right now. Just prior to that addition onto that power plant, the utilities building was constructed in 1950. Our administration offices building, actually one wing of it at one point was a museum, an art museum, just prior to when I started working here. And then in addition, some more additions were added on from 1965 up till today to try to meet our needs. And then at the same time, this power substation that feeds a lot of our needs out of the power plant was constructed in 1956 with upgrades back in 1968-69. So as you can see, back to almost 75 years ago, we're trying to deal with a population that's gone from 18,000 to well over 115,000 and meet those needs with basically the same facilities. And it's been a challenge in the last 20 years. That's why I've been working on these assignments for the last 4 mayors, the last 4 directors, is because our needs continue to grow and change, but we just haven't had that window of opportunity that we feel like we have now. Just wanted to roll through real quickly, and some of these are a little hard to see because they're a little dark, just some of the challenges that we're facing right now with our facilities. This isn't our administrative building. That space between the brick and the top is where the wall is starting to collapse. There's a good 6-inch space in there. The brick's just starting to fall apart and disintegrate, and the walls are just starting to collapse upon themselves. You can see here in the upper left-hand corner, cracks through the walls. This is in the administrative building again as well. We have a lot of those. The soil is settling, continuing, and that brick is starting to separate from it. We're having a lot of issues with those situations clear around the building. The bottom right-hand corner is hard to see, but over 55 years ago, this was our boiler. It was installed in the building that we're still using. With pneumatic controls, we can't really control the temperature. And for instance, this last winter, it got so hot in our buildings, we had our windows open because we can't control with those old controls, even the temperature of the building, or it would be cold. And it was just, it can be very entertaining to come to our facility in the winter or in the summer. Some of our other features that we have is we've just outdated plumbing. On the far right picture, you can't see it, but to the right of that urinal, we don't usually show these types of pictures. But there used to be another one just like it. We were having a lot of issues with it. Found out that the pipes were completely disintegrated. We're worried that current one is the same situation here. We might deal with it soon. The other one was capped off. We'll probably be capping that one off soon and trying to find other alternatives within the building to be able to do what we need to do. And so those are some challenges that we have. Yeah, we'll head over to the rec center. You can shower there too. Again, same type of situation. You can see a lot of these brick walls on that administrative building. Again, cracks, bricks. There's just a lot of settling going on, a lot of challenges that we have. This is the power plant. Same problems. You see cracks up the walls all throughout the power plant. That when we had the structural engineer come in and do some assessments with our architectural firm, they said this is a real problem waiting to happen. On average, just in our administrative building alone, we spend about $50,000 per year on maintenance, upgrades, trying to just keep up with the problems that we have. It's costing us a lot of money. Some of the other challenges we have, I mentioned crew equipment and vehicle needs. You can't see this really well because it's kind of dark, but in front of that truck are 3 other trucks in that truck bay. They kind of spread out, and then another one pulling behind that truck at night. We cram all the vehicles we can in there. We've got about 30 vehicles that should be inside during the winter months because of the diesel fuel will freeze up. We try to keep them plugged in because a lot of them are outside in the elements, even if they're under a canopy. And many mornings we go out and the trucks won't start, and we have to get everything warmed up just to even be able to utilize the vehicles, and it causes some real inefficiencies with our crews. But even in this situation, it's a hazard when we have to respond to an outage, a big outage, and we need the truck that's in the front. They've got to pull all the other trucks out to get to that one vehicle, to the line truck of some sort. And so we certainly have some crew and equipment needs. Like I said, we got an engineering assessment done by WPA Architecture and Dynamic Structures. With our facilities, they say they currently don't meet any seismic standards. They're all in poor condition and have many code violations. So we have some real serious challenges. We need to determine how we're going to approach them at this point. We'll get to those approaches here in just a second. I put that picture up of that south stack because there used to be a cap on that stack. A few years ago, the cap started to fall apart and fall down, large chunks onto our pavement. We actually had our gate shut down for almost 2 years because we could not guarantee the safety of any vehicle that passed by that until we were able to get. It cost us about $100,000 to get the equipment in there just to repair that top of that stack from falling down. And so, some serious challenges. Again, I mentioned emergency response. For us, that's our biggest issue. Reliability is our most important feature. We want to be the most reliable municipal utility in the country. And in order to do that, we feel like we need facilities that we can respond from properly. And that's why we like where we're at. There are some people that think we ought to be somewhere else in the city, that we shouldn't be right downtown Provo, right in the heart of the city. But like fire stations are strategically placed in neighborhoods to have a 3 to 4 minute response, in downtown Provo, we can get to about any neighborhood in about 10 minutes and have power restored shortly thereafter. And for us, and reliability's sake, in response to the citizens, we think that's critical and important. If a major catastrophe hits a Provo area, there are concerns that the department will not be able to respond adequately to assist their customers. That's from our architect, as they did our needs assessment. Conservation and sustainability is another issue that we are really concerned with. Any of you that, I think you all have probably toured our building at one point or other, it is probably one of the most energy efficient buildings in the city. Energy inefficient, yeah. It is unbelievable. You can stand by those windows and they're closed, but in the winter they really don't feel like it. We had, when customer service was in our building, we had more space heaters operating at one point just to keep people warm. But the current facilities use energy at very inefficient levels according to the architect. But some of the features that we are really excited about looking to the future are adding solar panels and skylights to utilize natural lighting. We want to be the energy wise leader in the city. We want to lead out in the city and show people how to be energy efficient, how to conserve. And then one of the things we talked about is to meet some level of LEED certification. We want to make sure that we have a building that's something to be proud of and something that we can walk our citizens through and educate them. And so that kind of led us to our master planning phase of this. After the needs assessment was done and we went through all the concerns and issues with the architect and the engineering firm, we came up with 3 design options that we were challenged to look at. They were asked to look at these various things: the cost and benefits, needs to meet the Provo Power needs for our crews to be able to respond and be able to have a good workflow within our company to continue to serve our citizens, to look at the demographic forecast in the future, look at the future of 800 North. That road is going to potentially be a freeway on-ramp and be expanded. And so you'll see in our designs later on, we've augmented, we've been able to utilize that. Mixed use, we looked at options for mixed use on the property. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Incorporating more green space and park areas in the property. We want to be open to the neighborhood and provide access to them to utilize various features of our facility as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here. And then again, conservation, sustainability. And so the first option that we were asked to look at was to look at an addition to a remodel of the current facilities I just showed you pictures to. And as we went through that, you can see everything's laid out very much similar, the same. The only changes you'll notice here is that you'll notice that the power plant is gone. We'll talk about that here in the next phase. The plan would be to build a new power plant that's much more efficient, add a couple more turbines, produce a little bit more power that we might need here in the future, not just for peaking, but maybe even for base load. We'll put it in a location where it's located right next to the substation that feeds it, and be able to generate some efficiencies there. Everything else will be about the same. When we went through this phase of the project, it amounted to about $24 million to be able to go through and bring everything up to code, up to seismic codes, and make sure that we meet all the modern standards for ADA, et cetera. But it included coming in and dead ending 650 north here on the south end, as well as closing out 300 west here on the west side of the property. As you know, we own 3 of these homes on this side and 2 on this side. We've taken 2 down. We have 2 more that will come down in September. So we own this entire property, including the 2 park parcels that are right across the street here on 3rd and 300 West. So we have a significant footprint here that we can utilize to make our operations more efficient. Option 2 was to remodel the power plant. This is one we were really excited about. As we went through that building, there was a tremendous amount of space in that building, 60,000 square feet. As we brought in the engineer, we brought in the architect, and we started looking at the building and what it would cost to be able to upgrade that building for seismic codes. Because it was built back in 1940, it would be a tremendous amount of money. And it was a little disconcerting, frankly, to some of us, because we were really excited about that. And then including the addition of some new vehicle bays. You'll notice the one feature that never moves, that's the Google Fiber building. All the fiber in the city connects at that point, and so that's one feature in that process that has to stay. And so this was the other option that we picked to review and to study. Again, that one came to about $27 million to go through that process and be able to do that. And then option 3 was a complete all new facilities, basically start new, which will be a challenge if we did this, to phase through the process and keep our operation up and running. It's something that certainly is a possibility. And so we went through various designs. This is one of the first ones. We had new office buildings with a new warehouse, new vehicle bays, incorporating the full yard here again with a roundabout here, closing 3rd West, putting the parking lot in here. Again, pulling down and building a new, more efficient power plant. Just so you know, with the power plant, we have certain environmental air quality permits that we have to operate that permit. We only have permission to use them on this site. If we're going to do anything with the power plant, we can only do it on this site. We couldn't move it anywhere else in the city, so it has to stay here. And so this was kind of option 3. And this one came out to just a little bit over $25 million for the cost of this project, to be able to run through that project. As we went through the process and looked at all those 3 different phases and the costs and pricing and the benefits associated with it, after a thorough examination of the existing structures and considering all aspects of each option, WPA Architecture recommends that Provo City proceed with option 3. This option will give the city the facilities that will meet the needs of the department and the city and will last for many years to come. Again, we're hoping 30 to 50 years. And so this is kind of the design that we came up with in this conceptual phase. Continue to have the pole yard here. We'll dead end the street with a cul-de-sac, close 3rd West. Where we have these 2 parks here, we'll put a park up here on the northwest corner. We provided a sidewalk and a trail from the neighborhood here to the west to let them come up to utilize the park, or even get down to the rec center. We've again moved the power plant. The goal in the plant, and we'll show you some 3D modeling here in just a second, is to have these buildings designed, even the power plant, such that it looks like an office complex. windows and everything, you wouldn't know that inside there's some turbines. And other cities in the state of Utah have been able to do that very well, and we want to copy what they've done. We include a new complex here with the office building, with a portion of it 2 stories. One of the main reasons we want that 2 stories is for emergency response. Should there be an earthquake, a dam breaks, or whatever, we've been told by the Corps of Engineers we could have a minimum of 8 feet water level. Right now, all of our communications infrastructure is in the basement of our building. All of our computer operations, all of our dispatching is there. And so if we're going to continue to operate and respond to the citizen needs in a situation like that, we need to have that up above ground so that we can do so. It would include new vehicles, new vehicle bays for all the crews, so the trucks can actually come in, swing in, pull in at night, load their trucks, everything, get all their gear and equipment from the warehouse, and then they can head out in the city and do what they need to do. They can come to the pole yard, pick up their transformers, whatever it might need to be for their work, a very efficient work space for what we need to do. So that's kind of where we were at with that. With that, I just wanted to show you real quick and remind you, again, this is just conceptual. We're now kind of ready to go out with an RFP for the final architectural designs. And so this is just conceptual of this architect's rendering of how this place might look. This will kind of give you a 3D walkthrough. This is right on the corner of Freedom and 8th North. That would be the front of the building, although that would not be where the citizens would come in anymore. As you pan around here a little bit more towards the west, you're also asked to try to augment the rec center and match it somewhat. We've also tried to include features from the old power plant, same similar style of windows, the soffit, the fascias, everything could look like the old power plant did. This would be the warehouse, which in any city USA could almost look like a library as much as it would a warehouse. You wouldn't even know that it's a warehouse. We're pretty happy with a lot of the features of the designs, although it won't obviously look like this. As you know, when you go to the next phase, it will change quite a bit. But this will be the entrance here on the west side of the building. We park, parking space for over 100 parking spaces for employees and citizens to come in and meet with us in the warehouse. And then these are the truck bays with skylights on the tops to be able to utilize natural lighting instead of having to have the lights on all day long. But there will be plenty of bays for all the trucks to come in and park. It will be wide enough that the tree crew can pull their bucket truck in, their brush truck, and their chipper, and we won't have to worry about them not operating until in the winter. But again, it's all conceptual. And most certainly will change. But really a complex that we're pretty excited about, and we think it will help us meet the needs of the citizens for the next 30 to 50 years and actually be much more efficient and effective and be more reliable, which is always a back over here to the east side of the building. Again, trying to incorporate some features from the old power plant, that old look there. We're pretty proud of that building as well.
As Scott suggested, I wouldn't read too much into the design of the building. One guidance we gave the architect for this modeling was be respectful of the rec center, because they eventually sort of look like all one complex. But again, that's final design. This is pretty good for massing purposes. Understand the scale of the building, but may not be at all what it looks like.
Yeah, there's plenty of debates between our department alone and how we all want it to look. We all have our own tastes and our own desires, and that's something that we have to flesh out. Again, I'm not going to rehash these, but these are some of the important issues that we want to be able to meet to improve our efficiencies with our citizens. So, are there any questions or comments you have? The reason we bring this up is because, as we move forward, we need your buy-in. We want your buy-in. We're going to be taking this to the citizens. There's some significant changes that are going to happen when those smokestacks that are not reinforced and are already falling apart have to come down. We're sure that, and we have members of our power board, they don't want to see them come down either, because they have become a significant part of the Provo city skyline. But right now, in some situations, the only thing that's holding them up are the banding that was put around them years ago, and then some of the cell tower features that are now holding them up. So,
those come apart.
Did you say you had 30 trucks?
Yeah, we have about 25 trucks that have to be inside in the winter time.
You only have 10 bays?
Yeah, there's 10 bays. The bay, that building is actually 75 feet wide. So one bay would be able to hold 3 vehicles.
Oh.
So a bucket truck, a brush truck, and a chipper, or a line bucket truck, and then their line truck behind it. And so we'd be able to fit all those vehicles in there. Plus, there actually is room on that south end if we ever needed to add another bay or two, we could as well for future growth. And then the Google Fiber building, are you doing sort of facade work? That's going to be a beautiful building with the Google Fiber, not so beautiful in the middle. Yeah, we've had some discussions with them. One of the things we need to do is provide them access in and out of the complex, some parking spaces as well for part of the agreement. But that definitely is a feature that we're going to want to in that one. So, I need to say something, Wayne? No. Okay.
I was just gonna add, Google, the fiber building's relatively new.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
It's
Yeah.
only about 10 years old.
Maybe
Yeah.
it was just the stuff piled up outside.
Yeah, that's probably what you're
It's not
seeing.
so-
Probably
I'm trying
the
to remember.
backside.
You were seeing the backside?
Kind of slightly at the backside.
It
And that
actually
has
runs
been-
off the street. And it's-
Yeah,
And
when-
it's nice.
When one of their vendors was in previously, they've now left. There was a bunch of stuff they had stacked back there they've taken, but.
Okay.
And
so
so
it
that will
wasn't the
change
building.
it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
apologize.
And we'll definitely be separated by them from some fencing and some walls so that we can keep them separate and they don't feel like they're encroaching on us and vice versa.
I've had some people comment to me that they're hopeful that maybe that Provo Power Building could be saved because it has been an iconic part of Provo for so long, and the power utility is really an important part of Provo. So I was glad to see that there was one proposal in there where it looks like the architects considered that.
Yeah.
And you liked that plan as well? It was just a couple $1 million more.
From a sentimental perspective, I think we all loved it. The challenge was that the building ends up being, well, one, not very efficient, and number two, extremely expensive to make seismically secure. It's all unreinforced masonry. So you'd build a whole new building on the inside of that building.
That's typically what we've had to do with
Yeah.
the library
Yeah.
and some others.
Right.
It's been worthwhile to do in those
Yeah, and
days.
the concrete roof is just set on there. They're not even strapped to the internal
So that
frame.
would have to be fixed.
Yeah, it's a pretty expensive proposition.
And the challenge we had from a workflow process with that building is that it actually sits about 5 feet above the grade. And so to be able to fit our warehousing operations and get the crews equipment in there to pick up the gear and that from the warehouse and somehow get it on their trucks and get that, most of that real estate in that building is vertical. And it makes it really hard to operate from a feature where you have crews that need to get information from the engineers. That goes out the warehouse. They get all the equipment put together out on the dock for the crews to come pick up. The crews come in to pick it up and then they're out in the field. And to do that in that building is just, we tried a number of ways to try to fit
There
that
might
in
be
there.
some challenges, but I think, at least what I'm hearing is that it's a significant consideration that ought to be looked at and maybe even endure some inconvenience for the sake of preserving such an important part of Provo. So it wasn't that bad. Now, what were the differences? It was
About $3 million.
$3 million more than the lowest cost option.
Yeah, $4 million more than the remodel, $3 million more than the dome.
And you have been saving $6 million a year for the last year.
Wish we had. One thing we have done, though, Mr. Chairman, is we recently paid off some bonds that were associated with the earlier energy supply. So there is a revenue stream currently coming into the energy fund that could sustain a bond issue without having to raise power rates. And so we do have that option available to us, again, in context of many other needs in energy. So again, it's one to consider, but there is an available revenue stream that can cover the cost of that. Now, again, and this doesn't all have to be done in year one or year two. This is, again, a project that can be phased over several years.
And you're
As we look at a number of building projects, and we've talked about this building, we've talked about this whole block, we've talked about uniting with the school district, and doing some things. The proposal for that main building there was just a 2-story building. Have we, I mean, in 10 years, we're gonna think, man, why didn't we do this 4 stories? Now we've got the ground, I mean, are we?
We did ask the architect who did the site planning and needs analysis to look at a 25, 30-year horizon. And so we looked at the growth in the community, we looked at what's needed in terms of facilities. We actually think from the energy perspective, this does that. This gets us to a 30-year window. You know, whether there's a point at which we could, you know, again, we talked about some mixed use, potentially leasing office space in a larger building. I think those things could certainly all be on the table. Up to this point, our discussions with the school district have been, they're very focused on their bond election coming up. They're very focused on not muddying the water by throwing administrative offices into the equation. So I think the timing's not right for them, but again, you know, that we could certainly look at the possibility of adding a floor to the building and having it available should it make sense to do at some point in the
There
future.
was also some concerns with that for parking and vehicle access because the trucks have to have clearance so much clearance to get in and out, especially if you have the trailers hooked on. So just with the utility employees alone, the parking can get tight. Then you add mixed use, then you have access to the street, and then you're on that intersection. And so there came a lot of other things that
Yeah, we
made
went
it
through
awkward.
several preliminary designs and drawings, moving things around to try to fit some mixed use in there. And, you know, to get the equipment in and out of those bays and be able to meet the workflow that we have to meet. Made it challenging.
The other thing we have been concerned about too, and Scott mentioned it earlier, was the eventual street profile of 800 North, recognizing as the hospital moves south and we move north, and we potentially have a situation where at some point in the next 20 years, we may have a freeway interchange that hits 8th North. We tried to be very sensitive to that, so we actually did set the building back in a ways, yeah, so that at some point in the future, if that, yeah, so you can kind of see how we made the little jog there for 800 North to assume you'd be adding a couple of lanes at some point to 8th North. And again, as the hospital moves further south toward 8th North, we're having the same discussions with them currently about trying to make sure we provide enough street right of way to handle an enhanced intersection there at some point.
Mr. Sewell.
I thought I read somewhere that the energy department had its own data center. Is that part of this facility?
Yeah, and that again would be located in the upper level.
The upper level?
Yeah.
It is redundant with the city center, so it's two different locations.
One of the things I was asked to do with the last director was look at some of the last big natural disasters, the last big Hurricane Sandy, and one of the biggest things that I researched and found out was, in almost every one of those instances, every emergency response situation, whether it's police or fire, all of their response stuff always happened to be on the first level or the basement. Whether it's communications or anything else. And now in all the redesigns since those storms have come through was to get everything moved up above ground so that they could actually respond. Because they were inundated by flooding that they would never forecasted. And they couldn't respond, they had to set up somewhere else to respond.
So if the ground floor is flooded, they can still continue working.
Or generators upstairs.
A little bit too much to try to combine a total city command center there. Sorry, that's just too much with fire and all that.
I don't know if it came up, but why in all of this is that those buildings are not changed and we have an earthquake or flood, energy mobility, earthquake.
It's simply losing the towers alone, and the first little significant tremor we have, those towers are coming down. And it pretty much wipes out the campus, just the fall radius of those towers.
Right across our office.
Yeah, it comes right across Kat's office.
We're worried about that too. You saw the settling on the walls and the equipment where we park the trucks. You know, the engineer came in and he just started laughing when we walked in there. He's like, you're out of luck. Something happens. The way the roof is built, this thing's just going to fall. Your trucks are going to be right there. What are you going to do?
Are bring them down today? I mean, can we bring the towers down? Are they used?
We'll have to eventually bring them down.
So they're not functional, right? They're not part of the power.
All they are is.
So they could come down.
Although the contractor, we should make sure the contractor erects a temporary translucent fence so that we can charge admission.
There we go. Watch that happen. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, we are generating a pretty substantial revenue off of leases on those stacks today, and so under any scenario, we'd probably replace something of similar height. Maybe it's just a metal tower or something, some kind of, could conceivably be another iconic. We've actually had one member of the Energy Board suggest we put a neon sign up there that says Provo City Power, and then put it on a steel tower.
Or another tree.
Yeah, or another tree. Yeah, we could. Yeah, palm tree might be good this time. So
the highest facilities on that are about 70 feet tall. Those stacks are actually up to 210 feet, the tallest one, and so those towers will still be significant size, but certainly not near what the height of the towers are.
So we don't use those. No smoke comes out of them.
No, those are used for nothing but those telecommunications. Yeah. You're holding it up. We're pretty
really,
sure.
really pretty tower. Yeah.
And if we get new power generation, will we transfer the, because they're gas, will we just move those over, or will we have to get new?
we would
Probably
probably
get
get new
new,
turbines.
much more
They're so
efficient.
Inefficient.
Ours and ours, and they
They're
rattle
old.
everywhere.
Those are how old.
Noisy.
Rattling is stop.
Yay.
If you look at the state implementation plan, the SIP,
No brand new ones.
the SIP for air quality, they would, if we got a new efficient generator, they would let us put more capacity on there. I don't think, if you look at where the air quality is going, I don't think they would allow us to move those old generators to use those. So we would have to build new turbines, and we want to be more energy efficient, less cost in the long run, and provide more power. We could put more capacity on that.
Yeah, you got a 60,000 square foot building right now producing how many megawatts?
10 megawatts.
10 megawatts.
And
10
we could
meg-
put one turbine there, 15, we could put 3 turbines there, 40
in a
megawatts.
building that's a fraction of that size. And we went and visited one that Bountiful recently put in, and, you know, the neighbor right next door in the house was really concerned. They built these huge masonry walls to separate him from that. Can't even hear it when it's up and running in the building. So much more quieter, they're so much more efficient. Yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, they have their offices right inside, close to it. That's a great feature.
Splendid work. This is very appealing. And speaking of air quality, Mr. Air Quality has arrived. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to introduce Don Jarvis, who chairs the Mayor's Sustainability Committee and has come here to justify its existence.
May I also add, we've discussed with leadership in Don passing a joint resolution of support for the Sustainability Committee. It currently does not exist in ordinance. It's one of our committees that's functioning at a very high level. And so there was some discussion about making it a tad bit more formal, and we felt like the joint resolution of support was a good step towards that.
So that might be forthcoming in the near, yes, quite near future. Yes.
We're ready for that.
All the more timely that Mr. Jarvis is with us.
I have a brief report on what we've been doing with all the mayor's money. I only have 15 copies. I probably should have done more. Well, Mayor Curtis asked us to start in 2011 and in February or so, and since then we've been concentrating primarily on air quality, but we've done some other things too. We had in last December we helped the mayor and Chamber of Commerce organized the Utah County Business Clean Air Summit. And that's turned out to be kind of a big deal, and they've done a lot of good things, including a continuing Clean Air Task Force, which met yesterday afternoon, by the way. And we are continuing the work of the summit. And Mayor Curtis has set a good example by developing a Provo City policy for orange and red air days, which has been looked at by other cities, including Orem. Orem followed our lead, basically. And we're developing a program to provide a set of flags which signal the air quality for the day for every public school in Utah County. Our own little sustainability committee has had anti-idling campaigns 3 years running, and this has resulted in us being able to put up anti-idling signs in every single public school parking lot and several businesses in Provo. We'd like to have more, but I've got 15 more signs. If you know any place that needs a sign, Mr. Hales?
I'll think about it. That would be a good place.
Yeah. Anyway, we have more signs. We have to put them up. They're $20 a piece. We got our first 60 for free from the feds, and Mayor Curtis ended up for $20 a piece for another 50. So we got some more for that. We participated in the Clear the Air Challenge, and that's going on again this year. It'll be in July this year, and Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce is working on this in conjunction with the Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce. They, for 3 years, the Salt Lake City did this as a city project, and then when the federal money ran out, the Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce realized that almost all the participants were in different businesses that were competing against each other and having fun, looking for prizes that the city could do to drive their driving down the most. And so Chamber of Commerce said, this is us. And so Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce is very vigorous involved. Ryan Evans was with us yesterday at the Utah County Business Clean Air Summit, Clean Air Task Force. We're also interested in compressed natural gas, as we share David Sewell's interest in that, and doing what we can. Don't have any results to report yet, but chicken and egg problem, but we're very supportive of that. We're doing quite a bit with recycling. We helped to get the opt-out recycling marginally. I don't think we were big players in it, but we did help get the word out, and are delighted that we have residential recycling. There's so many communities around us that don't have it. And that includes Dr. Miner's community of Springville. He's really upset. He says, how can you get recycling down in Springville? I said, I don't know, what's your problem? But we do have about 70% of our residents participating in recycling. There has been a drop in it, in recycling, which leveled off about in July. But our people from Republic Services say that we have a very, very squishy, easy program to get out of. And most cities have, it's a little harder to get out of the recycling once you pass the period of opt-out. We're kind of easygoing on this. She thinks we ought to be tougher. That's a political issue for you to decide. But we're doing a lot of updating of the information on our website, and we'll have some material in the city newsletter that will help residents be more informed about what is recyclable and what is not, and why recycle. It does save the city a fair amount of money in the tipping fees. I don't know, a lot of you don't or may not be aware of the tax credits for recycling that your previous city council passed or helped us acquire. We have a recyclable market development zone, which allows businesses that participate in recycling or use recycled materials or buy equipment to recycle. They can get very significant tax credits, state tax credits. So we were helped in that process. We like the land use issues too, because we realize that once land gets a portion for a certain purpose, it's really hard to change it, and it has a great effect on quality of life. So we're interested in land use. We haven't done a huge lot on it, but we did support the Utah Lake Commission's model ordinance, and our people in the planning department are trying to adapt that to Provo's west side. We also, at the mayor's request, submitted to the planning division a revision of the city's residential landscaping code, which allowed for water-wise landscaping, whereas before the only true landscaping was Kentucky bluegrass. And now you can have all kinds of things in your park strip. We also support the Utah Lake Commission's plan to establish a nature center, and this is, I think, time for me to just mention that this would be a huge benefit for Provo, a nature center that would have educational, tourist, and research value right here. I think it'd be a huge benefit for Provo. And if things are a little slow there, they're not getting much. They've got a lot planned. They have good ideas for it. Haven't got a lot of money raised for it. But if we were to commit to some funds for maintenance of the nature center, we would get it. Right now, it may go to Provo. It may go to other cities. But that's something to think about: is maintenance funds for a Utah Lake Nature Center. And I'm sure that the Utah Lake Commission will be happy to talk to you about that. I think it's something to really think We're meeting with stakeholders and planners on open space on Provo's west side. And we have aggregated community gardens, and that's now part of the Parks Master Plan, showing that nagging sometimes helps.
You have 3 of them, right?
What?
You have 3 of them, 3 gardens.
Well, we hope so. We hope so. They don't always tell us exactly what's going on, but we really nagged Roger, and he was really resistant. But his heart was in it, but he says, "My budget's not there." Anyway, it's in the master plan. We hope to think of it coming forward. We were working on a green business program to recognize businesses that are doing good environmental things. It wasn't really quite right for the city, and so we've talked the county health department into doing this. I met this morning with Dr. Miner and several people in health education. They're going to start a countywide clean business program to recognize businesses that make significant progress in 3 areas. Well, 5% reduction in their electric bills, gas bills, other bills. Just small improvements in 3 areas, and we'll stamp them on the forehead as a clean business, and they can use the logo, always the county's logo. So that's a brief survey of what we've been doing. Sure.
To that, Don was part of the Vision 2030. Sustainability was one of the 13 categories, and most of those teams kind of went back to what they were doing. And Don was so passionate about sustainability, he kept his group together, and that's really today's version of the sustainability committee came out of Vision 2030 when he held his team together and kept having regular meetings with them when everybody else was saying where it was done. So Don really has carried a big load, and you can see a pretty substantial list of accomplishments. We joked a little bit about using our funds. I think the total 4 years of budget would not exceed $1,500 we've done.
And 900 of it was old campaign donations that the mayor and I donated to the cause. So I think city funds have only been less than $500.
He finally talked me into a budget this year of
$950.
$950 for each committee for copies and for some of these signs. So really pretty amazing what he and his team have done and contributed to the dialogue. And the other thing that's really not on there is he and I would probably both call it nagging, but his perpetual influence in a positive way, and it's hard to really put that on any of these lines, but he's always there with suggestions and thoughts and ideas about how we can do better, and really played an important role for us.
I have to give credit to the mayor because he's willing to meet with us every month and hear us nag, and he has good ideas too. It's fun to talk and have his support. Without his support and his encouragement, none of this would happen.
Who are the members of your committee? How many are there?
We have about 10 members. There's some turnover, but there's, I should have listed them, but actually you can find them on the we now have a city website. Yeah, well, no, it's if you Google up, go into the city website and go under boards and commissions, just go down to the one with the longest name, Sustainability and Natural Resources Committee, and there we are. We have Rick Cox, who's a local businessman. We have Stephen Hales, who works with the health department. We have Mike Mills, who's an expert on Utah Lake and endangered species and all that sort of thing. We have George Hanley and Ginger Woolley, who are passionate about preserving Rock Canyon and nature in general. We have Rachel Whipple, who is an activist, a young mother, and very, very good on she's working on our anti-idling campaign. And let's see, who else have we got? Escaping right now. Yeah, well, of course, we have great city staff with Wright, what's his name? Dustin Wright. He's our liaison with the planning division. He takes the minutes for us and gives us access to maps and things. The planning division has been great to work with. We have a good relationship with Bill Caparoni and the planning division. They help us understand what's going on, what we have to be looking at. Got other questions?
So we'll be bringing that resolution up to the upcoming work meeting.
And in the resolution is a suggestion that we meet regularly and consult with you folks. And I think that would be helpful because we have been perhaps derelict in not coming and extending your work meetings more than already are. But we would love to have greater participation. Dave Sewell and I, when we attended the convention in Fort Collins last year, the Net Zero Cities Convention, we said we really ought to be more involved, as he was putting his own election in jeopardy there with the Net Zero Cities campaign or convention.
We would be interested to learn more about the needs of the anticipated nature center with respect to maintenance.
I think it'd be great to invite Reed Price to come talk to you about it. It's really exciting, and I think it'd be a huge draw for things to do in the summer, and it'd be great education for our kids and provide a wonderful research resource for UVU and BYU.
Other questions? Mr. Travis.
Thank you, Don.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the support of the cities. It's great to work with the city employees. They're really, there's all kinds of green things we've done before we ever came on board, or happening now. We just like the smart metering. This is all great stuff. Great to work with the city.
Thank you very kindly.
So Don, did you ride your bike today?
I did this morning to the first two meetings. With this meeting, I put on this and I got
almost always shows up on his bike.
Yes, yes, he does.
You didn't touch on your solar program. That might be.
Well, that's not something that really is part of the city's, but the mayor was kind enough to notice. I'm a member of another environmental group, the Utah Valley Earth Forum, and we've had a couple of group solar programs which have vastly expanded the number of residents in Provo and surrounding cities that have solar power.
Tell them your power bill is.
My power bill for this month is $3.01. First bill I got was $5.80.
In between, they get higher though.
Yeah, but Travis always wins this one. But we appreciate Provo Power buying power from us at retail rates other than wholesale rates. So it's and it's great to work with people. I had good experience in working with Provo City Power to get our solar program. Yep. Saved a lot of greenhouse gases. Saved a lot of family budget.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jones.
Yes, it's my understanding that administration has requested a closed session, and that has been done to have a strategy discussion regarding sale of property, which is one of the reasons it's permissible in the statute for closed session. So,
Motion to adjourn as a municipal council.
No, this is a regular city matter, and
it would stay.
The motion is
already
just to close the session.
Yes. This is property owned by the city now already, correct?
That's correct.
And please, I think we are setting up down policies.
So shall we move out of close or?
I would move to close and reconvene.
I invite that motion. Mr. Winterton, thank you. Second. Ms. Santiago?
The food will arrive at 4 pages.
I note a query from,
I have a request. Brian, one of the things that we were talking about, I want to talk to you about is how you handle closing and opening again your closed door sessions. Per Jeff Hunt, who talked to you in St. George, I guess, we made presentations, but he also presented to us that you need to come back into a public setting to exit. You go in and you eat lunch, dinner there, and we don't know as a public when you've adjourned, because it could be that you're just going to go into your next meeting as a closed door session instead of publicly adjourning the closed door session. And I just want to, he instructed the media on how closed door sessions are supposed to work. He did it perfectly wonderful by saying what the reason was and adjourning, but you're supposed to have that, have them come back and do it in front of the public when you're done with that closed door session, from what we understand.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I'll have to look. I'm not aware of anywhere in the statute that requires that. Our typical practice is to have a motion to adjourn the meeting and then to open the doors at that point. I'll look into it and see, but I'm not aware that it says that in the statute.
I don't ever know, because we're always excused. We don't know that you've officially come back and then officially close that, because when you have dinner and go into your regular session, you could still be officially in a closed door session, even though you're
You do open the door.
That's not what happens. There's always an adjournment at the end of the closed session. We open the door. There's no way to predict how long the closed session would be, so we couldn't notify you when the door is going to open. However, we do put on all our public notices that there may be informal discussion during that dinner hour when the door is open, and that's at the bottom of our agenda.
Just check and see if you have to do that in front of the public. That's the question.
The adjournment?
Yes.
I'm happy to check, but I do not.
That's something Jeff Hunt was talking about to us, and he wanted us to make sure that our cities were doing that, because they've been having problems evidently in the state with the proper way to close and to bring back.
Certainly, if the meeting continues afterwards, that's a problem, but our typical practice has been that that's always the last item on the agenda. So once the closed session is over, the meeting is over. And then the next meeting is a new meeting.
I'm just saying, he asked me to put that out to you the next closed
It's a great question, and we'll look at it.
I can see some potential confusion because even though there are no more agenda items, in theory, we could reconvene with the council. The public who may be waiting in here would have no idea that we reconvened and we're reconsidering the previous agenda.
So one possibility is to return to this setting.
Either that or to be more clear when we're done.
That adjournment.
Maybe more than opening the doors.
Walk down the hall and say we're open.
The other option is that you invite us to leave, you have your closed door session here, and then you go eat dinner informally down there.
Well, practically that's not possible. Time constraints. The dinner, they conduct business and dinner concurrently.
But we'll ask our council to advise us about that at our next work session. So all in favor? Motion. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.